Welcome back to Dreamland Encounters, where I share stories of experiences that stretch beyond our everyday world. If you're new here, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Get comfortable and settle in. The lake was perfect that night, a mirror reflecting the sky, with stars scattered like ash across the black surface. I've been out there seeking silence after months of grueling 1-2-hour shifts at the plant. My home couch felt suffocating, so I'd escaped to the water in my old boat, a Coleman lantern in the bow, and the dock light off to keep the bugs away. It was well past midnight, and a thin silver moon hung low. The summer heat had broken, leaving a sharp, clean chill that made me pull my jacket collar tight. I'd been casting for hours, catching only smallmouth bass and wrestling with my own restless thoughts. The water was so still that wind couldn't even create a ripple. Frogs thumped rhythmically in the far reeds, and the boat creaked softly. Something felt different. My fishing line's strike indicator twitched, delicate, almost polite, like a cat's gentle paw. Then strange ripples began forming around the boat. Perfect concentric circles spread outward, as if someone was skipping stones, but no stone broke the surface. They moved toward me, and then dissolved without a sound. It felt like the lake was clearing its throat. I tried to rationalize it. Insects under the water, an odd wind pocket. But then my digital watch jumped back 2 minutes. My phone suddenly showed no service, despite having a signal just an hour earlier. I tucked the phone in my jacket, a sort of protective gesture. Then something moved in the lake's center. At first I thought it was a bird, a bright smear against the darkness. But it wasn't a bird at all. I was on the lake at night, rod in hand, when something strange began to unfold. There was this thing moving across the water's surface, silent and precise. No sound, no splash, just a narrow silver track gleaming under moonlight. It moved with an unnatural certainty, gliding like a marble across glass, completely flat and undisturbed. Then it did something remarkable. Its reflection transformed. For one brief moment it was a perfect silver sphere, small and bright. Then it flattened like a coin sliding across a table. But this wasn't a normal movement. It bent light itself. When that happened, the stars behind it shifted, as if someone had subtly nudged the entire night sky. I'd spent most of my life on this lake. I knew every shadow, every subtle movement. I'd seen logs floating, boats passing, all manner of reflections. But this was different, completely different. It moved without touching, without sound, like a pebble rolling without making contact with anything. My hands, usually steady from years of fishing, started shaking. I thought about grabbing my camcorder, but knew I couldn't. The object, if that's what it was, circled about 50 yards away, tracing an unusual pattern. It looked like someone drawing circles with a warped ruler. A hint of metallic sheen caught the moonlight, reminiscent of polished chrome. Then, suddenly, it vanished. Not flew away, not with any dramatic exit. It simply ceased existing. 1 second a silver line marked the water. The next, nothing. The surface returned to normal. Frogs resumed their chorus as if nothing had interrupted them. I sat in my boat, holding my fishing rod, arms cramping, waiting for some additional sign. Eventually, I returned to the cabin before sunrise, my body thrumming with unresolved adrenaline. The wooden boards creaked as I tied up the boat. Abby, the dog, barked her usual irritated greeting. I tried telling Mary, the lake's owner, and my friend, with her rough laugh and rougher coffee, but the words stuck in my throat. Still, I managed to speak, desperate to make sense of what I'd witnessed. She was practical in a way that made you worry feel silly. At this hour was I sure I hadn't been dreaming. I was awake, rod in hand, watching. She chewed the inside of her cheek, searching for an angle I might have missed. Maybe a seal keeps coming in at night, she suggested, smiling in a way that portrayed her disbelief. You old fools and your stories. I didn't venture out that afternoon. Logic told me I'd been spooked by too many late nights, but the brain plays tricks. But curiosity isn't easily silenced. 2 nights later, I returned with a camcorder, thermometer, and my ever-present stubbornness. Sitting in the same spot, I watched the lake's center intently, like a blind man listening for a distant sound. Peculiarities surrounded me. Twice, my ear pressure dropped, as if in a plane. My watch seemed to slip time, nudged by an unseen force. The rod felt slightly warm against my hand, unusual in the cool night. Wood smoke drifted from a distant house. hinting at late-night grilling. The water hummed an unfamiliar tune. At 11:48, the camcorder's battery icon flashed. I swapped batteries, irritated. Later, rewinding the footage revealed a missing 30-second block, the tape cut clean, as if a sentence erased from a paragraph. The camcorder appeared untouched, its casing intact. A week passed uneventfully. I shared less with Mary, her laugh shrinking the experience, until it felt like a mere figment of imagination. Around this time, a black sedan appeared most mornings at the road's edge by the trees, always present at dawn, gone by noon, keeping its own schedule. I managed one grainy photograph, as if taken through a filter. Then, at 2:30 a.m., it happened again. The sphere emerged from the inlet, skimming closer than before. As it passed near the dock, the water around the pilings flashed brilliantly, like a sudden burst of light. I drifted across the boards, my hand passing through a cold spot where something had been, noticing Abby hadn't stirred on the porch, not even a twitch. Days later, I drove into town after burning breakfast, 2 beers, riding shotgun. The hardware store regular nodded along as I talked, his responses about wind tunnels and oil slick glints. At the sheriff's office, I shared my story, the strange light, the vanished footage. The sheriff's smile was knowing. "You keep telling yourself you're safe," he said, handing me coffee. "Maybe that's all you need right now." 3 days passed. Then they arrived. I spotted them before hearing the truck. 2 men seated on my porch swing, motionless as carved wood. Black suits pristine despite the long wait, they blended like identical shadows. One had a thin face, the kind that measured words before speaking. The other, a wide jaw set slightly back, shoulders rigid. My truck's engine died. Fight or flight kicked in first. I wanted to reverse and flee. Then pride seized me. I'd show no fear. 6 steps toward the porch, boots echoing a hollow rhythm. "Evening," the thin-faced man said, flat, polite. "Mr. Cole," I answered, my voice betraying weeks of tension. The wide-jawed man asked to sit. Their speech was measured, calculated, as if following a script written long ago. No urgency, no small talk, just precise execution of a predetermined plan. Questions burned inside me. How did they find me? What did they want? The silver thing. The missing tape. Something was coming. The 2 men watched me with a clinical precision, like thermometers tracking a patient's temperature. We sat on opposite ends of the swing, maintaining a careful distance. Their shoes were pristine, plain leather, without a single salt stain or grass mark. The thin-faced man's hands were folded neatly across his knee. "You fish at night a lot," he said finally. I confirmed that I did. The wide-jawed man suggested I stick to daytime, delivering the advice like a small kindness. I didn't know how to respond, which expression to show when a stranger offered unsolicited fishing advice. They smiled in that measured way people do when selecting words with extreme care. "There are elements more active at night," the thin man explained. "It's safer to be out in daylight." My response of understanding felt strange, almost foreign in my mouth. A small silver card appeared between us. When he slid it across, I examined it like someone peering through a distant window. An emblem, a reference code, no recognizable department. The numbers looked precise, almost clinical. "Who are you?" I asked. "Researchers," the wide man said. "Field sampling." He leaned forward with an attempted reassurance. "Public safety." The words carried weight. They were careful to sound administrative, like officials you could theoretically file a complaint with. Not threats. Instructions. "If something's bothering you, tell us," the thin man said. "We can help document it. No need to put yourself in harm's way." I mentioned a silver thing on the water. The sentence hung unfinished, like a rope suddenly cut. They nodded. Men who took mental notes without writing anything down. When the wide man's hand moved toward his pocket, I flinched reflexively. A pamphlet emerged instead, a nocturnal safety advisory, plain paper. Avoid nighttime activities near water. Someone had printed this with deliberate quietness. "You'll be all right going forward?" the thin man asked, phrasing it casually, like a neighbor inquiring about a minor household repair. "Do you work for the county?" I asked. The thin man said they were with a regional unit and could provide contact information through official channels if I requested it. He spoke as if the next move was mine, ready to step back if I wanted. Their visit lasted 20 minutes. They asked about my boat, my routine, the bait I used. Questions about Abby and whether I kept a light on the dock seemed routine, yet something about their manner made me want to respond with precise log-like details, exact dates, times, numbers. Their note-taking was casual, smooth, without any visible strain in their handwriting. When they left, they stood at the gravel lane's edge, watching the tree line until I lost sight of them. After their departure, I checked everything: my camcorder, the tape, my watch, the small items on my tackle shelf. The missing tape block hadn't reappeared. My spare fishing line reel looked slightly different, as if someone had carefully unwound a section to examine the filament before rewinding it. Days passed. The black sedan stopped appearing. The hardware store man started smiling at me again. Mary's approach changed, offering coffee more frequently, like she was testing a new way of showing concern. I began venturing out during daylight hours. The lake returned to normal, fewer ripples, fewer strange pressure changes. I told myself various things: that I was done with nighttime water trips, that I'd been fortunate, that the men had helped somehow. I convinced myself a person could be careful and stay safe. The card remained in my wallet, not to call, but like keeping a doctor's contact you hope never to need. Months went by. The camcorder stayed in the top drawer. Occasionally, I'd play the footage, watching until the missing frames made me feel like someone was editing my life. Long after their visit, I saw a brief glint on the water from the porch, just a coin-like sliver, and remembered that night. The dog glanced at the far shore, then went back to sleep. I chuckled quietly, remembering the wide man's advice about sticking to daylight. I never saw the silver thing again. I never received a call. Night brings different rules. At 2 a.m. I wake and listen, half expecting the water to clear its throat. Standing at the window, I watch the dark and the line of birches that stops the view. I tell myself I'm safe with lights on. The men in black became a story to tell when sounding worldly. Sometimes when launching the boat at midday, with the breeze right in the lake running like a polished plate, I let the rod hang loose and watched the horizon. I wonder if what happened was a charm, a trick of the light, an animal doing something graceful. Other times I think about how they bent the stars for a heartbeat and slid the card across, like people knowing the rules but wanting quiet. It felt like a warning and a favor simultaneously. Two men on my porch swing telling me to fish in daylight, like a neighbor suggesting I wear a jacket. I follow their advice. The night belongs to owls and the singing coyote. I go out when the sun is up, when the lake buzzes with dragonflies and life moving differently. I keep the card in my wallet not because I trust it, but to remember who warned me to be careful. Life settled back into its slow routine with small dramas. A fence needing mending, a generator that wouldn't start, a neighbor's kid bringing over a rescued raccoon. The sedan didn't return. The watch stopped its strange rhythm. We left at 4:30 in the afternoon, me, Jenna, and Mark. Loaded light for a quick overnight trip to the ridge above Coldwater Hollow. A forecast promised calm weather and a clear night, with thin fog in the valley, set to melt by mid-morning. I knew the route from years back before late bakery shifts and older knees. We wanted the valley view at dusk and the Milky Way after dark. Nothing complicated. I brought a small DSLR to pretend photography skills. Jenna had a phone camera, and Mark carried his never-dying headlamp. On the switchbacks, the trail smelled of crushed pine and dust. We joked and moved forward. We set up camp on a flat rock as the sky bled out, gold from the sun and silver from the incoming moon. Mark's stories about his cousin and raccoons drifted through the air while we laughed. The valley spread soft at our feet, and we traded push-ups like teenagers trying to feel alive. When the trees opened near the second saddle, the valley dropped away with fog pressed low like a heavy blanket. The silence was different, not quiet exactly, but muted. I noticed at first as a shape more than a thought. The usual sounds were there, but someone had turned down the bass. Distant river hum, cricket chatter, a far-off ATV, all present but dampened. Jenna noticed too. "Do you hear that?" she said, and we both knew talking about subtle weather changes was just a way to confirm we weren't imagining something strange. Around 9, as the last bright sunset strip faded, the fog began developing points of light. At first, we thought they were hikers' lights moving between cars and cabins, but they were too steady, nodes rising and lowering like breath. splitting and joining like schools of fish. Jenna zoomed in with her phone. Tiny white pinpricks moved slowly beneath the fog. They weren't on any road. The lights moved in perfect small arcs, as if drawn with a compass. Sometimes they would skim the tree line, drift to the middle, then circle back. Occasionally they'd slow, almost hovering, with a darker patch passing beneath them like the light was cutting through the air. Mark clicked his headlamp low, then off. Maybe some hunter with a drone, he muttered. But we all knew it was something else entirely. We were listening for something all evening, the buzz of drones, mechanical hums, nothing. The lights moved like delicate glass shells. I set up my DSLR on a small tripod, framing a long exposure shot over the valley. These photographs can capture satellite streaks, plane paths, smeared headlight lines, a river of light across the fog. As the shutter clicked and the screen glowed softly, we watched the lights move. Strange little moments flickered around us. My cheap digital watch blinked the wrong time for a second before resetting. Jenna's compass app spun wildly like a toy top before stabilizing. Mark's headlamp dimmed to a low orange, then snapped back to white as if someone flipped a switch. We laughed too loudly at mentions of electrostatic interference. Masking our unease, the lights began to braid together like threads, one skimming low over the fog before sinking. But this wasn't like a lantern's descent. Instead, the fog dimmed in a perfect 6-foot ring, as if an invisible hand pressed into its surface. A bubble of emptiness hung suspended, then drifted. When I tried to photograph the ring, the camera's live view stuttered once. The preview looked normal, but the ring was absent. Jenna's phone captured a brief snippet before her app declared the file corrupt. We traded knowing glances. The woods have a way of pushing against the edges of perception. Curiosity drove us down the ridge, navigating loose gravel and racing heartbeats. The fog rose like a curtain to meet us. Now the lights moved with deliberate purpose, slipping behind trees and darting across the field in jagged, almost purposeful lines. That's when we noticed something extraordinary. In the shallow spaces where lights passed, the fog formed columns resembling smoke. But not from any fire we recognized. The fog gathered in columns, always two, like paired legs. Not full figures, not even silhouettes, but something about the mist made shapes emerge. We had crept down to the tree line, looking out over the meadow. No hikers, no truck lights. Instead, lights moved along the field's far end, tracing intricate patterns. They looked like someone practicing with rope, moving with deliberate, patient economy. An airplane would streak across the sky and vanish in a heartbeat. These lights meandered differently. We watched as two of the brightest rose, hovering just above the ground, then sliding together. The fog between them rippled in a way that caught moonlight, for a moment almost metallic. My skin tingled. I set up the tripod and took a photo. The shutter clicked softly, normally. But when I checked the image, something was off. Streaks of starlight, but no lights. Everything we witnessed seemed to thin out in the camera's view. Small oddities accumulated around us. A deer waited, then walked away with purpose. A distant farm dog howled, marking time. A woodpecker stopped mid-beat, never resuming. The stars hung cold and bright overhead. Jenna had broken our silence first, her voice hushed. "Do you think anyone's down there? People?" Her whisper suggested the valley might be listening. We felt watched, not hunted, not afraid, but observed, like sensing someone standing just behind you from a shift in the air. We hiked back up in single file, heads down. The valley lights moved on their own schedule, unhurried. At camp, I packed my camera, hands tired. We drank tea and debated staying the night. Mark wanted to remain, Jenna didn't, and I wavered between. As we often do in mountains, we took turns keeping watch. One with a lighter pack, one always listening. I lay awake, thinking about what we'd seen. The night was quiet, punctuated by small sounds, the breathing of the valley, a twig shifting, beetles scurrying. My mind wandered to tiny mechanical details as the hours crept toward 2 a.m. Jenna's tap on my shoulder broke the silence. "Look," she whispered, pointing downward. Below us, lights moved with an unsettling precision. They wove a deliberate pattern, forming a perfect straight line across the misty meadow, terminating at a lone tree. One light hovered motionless at the tree's base. Then something shifted, not a sound, but an absence of sound. A pressure change swept through the air. Crickets fell silent. The world seemed to hold its breath. Jenna's soft laugh cut through the tension, the kind of laugh that keeps panic at bay. "That's not normal," she said. We decided to pack up, not with frantic energy, but with the calm deliberation of people wanting to distance themselves from something inexplicably strange. At the trailhead, a metal sign with regulations stood sentinel over a long gravel parking lot. Gravel crunched beneath our boots. The night smelled of cold iron. Halfway down the main road, a black sedan, gleaming as if freshly detailed, pulled up and stopped. Two men emerged, their movements synchronized and precise. One tall and lean with a sharp nose, the other shorter and broader. Both wore sunglasses despite the moonlight. They approached with hands held forward, a posture suggesting perpetual readiness. The thin man's smile never reached his eyes. "Evening," he said. "Any good photos?" The question hung in the air like a neutral object. I froze. Jenna went pale. Mark mumbled about lights. The men's expressions remained unchanged. "We mean," the tall one clarified, "did you get any photographs for records?" The word records carried in weight beyond its casual utterance. The shorter man produced a small card, holding it with calculated nonchalance. He slid something across my hand, an object with an emblem and a few letters I didn't recognize. "Not offering, just placing. If you have images," he said, "we can archive them for further study." My mind drifted to corrupt files, missing frames, the ring absent from my tripod shot. My mouth felt dry. I said, "We took some stuff. Some didn't save some." I held up my phone like a thin shield. "Do you want to see?" They responded with a patience that suggested this was routine. We sat on a metal bench by the lot, and I handed Jenna's phone over because her clip was better. The men examined it methodically, like checking a form, more glance than peer. A tap here, a silent nod there, and their questions were measured. How long were we on the ridge? How long did we watch the lights? Had we seen anything else? They wrote notes on a small pad. Casually they inquired about local hiking group memberships or regional nature photo contributions. "Calibration," the tall one said, as if that explained everything. His tone implied our camera alignment mattered more than the lights themselves. I remembered the moment my compass app spun wildly and my cheap watch blinked incorrectly. His pencil moved steadily across the page. They identified themselves as a regional observation unit documenting anomalies. Their advice sounded neighborly. Stay on well-traveled trails and avoid the valley after dark. Not a command, just a suggestion wrapped in public safety language. The shorter man added, almost offhandedly, "Stick to daytime hikes for a bit. It helps avoid trouble." The statement felt like a soft boundary. Up to this point, everything had been observations and questions. Now, someone was subtly limiting our movements. I had maps. I had routes I loved. Suddenly, taking the ridge at twilight felt like a potential violation. They were polite, precise, the kind of professionals you couldn't easily challenge. No badge, no clear office location, just a small card and a phone number. When I called later, a receptionist confirmed a unit existed, but would confirm nothing more. The men departed without drama, leaving behind more questions than answers. The week felt strangely off after that night. Black paint seemed to dissolve into darkness like oil. My camera captured star trails with unexpected gaps, segments missing as if deliberately cut from the film. Jenna's phone videos glitched, and Mark kept mentioning a black sedan parked on the road 3 mornings in a row, its occupants hidden beneath low-pulled hoodies. When we shared our experience, reactions varied wildly. Some friends listened sympathetically, others laughed, and a few suggested we'd been overexposed to mountain air. Life continued its rhythm. I returned to baking, timing my loaves to rise precisely when the shop opened. Jenna went back to her graduate seminars, and Mark spoke about rivers and driftwood. Night hikes became a thing of the past. Occasionally, I'd consider reaching out to the men, wanting their names or some official identification. But there was an odd, almost diplomatic politeness about their visit that made further inquiry feel inappropriate. Months later, a local outdoor forum thread caught my attention. Someone else had documented similar experiences. Their photos mirrored our own long exposure streaks with intermittent blanks. Comments ranged from technical analysis to casual jokes. Several users mentioned that a regional observation unit had requested their image files. Some reported that their photographs appeared normal until after this request, when small gaps mysteriously emerged. People offered various explanations: satellite interference, cosmic rays, faulty electronics. Yet these theories felt like hastily constructed explanations, unable to fully account for what we'd experienced. I still visit the ridge during daylight. The valley at sunrise is breathtaking, fog burning away as if nothing ever happened. Wildflowers dot the meadow, deer graze, and woodpeckers resume their rhythmic hammering. My camera stays packed, long exposures left to others. At night, I sleep with windows slightly open, maintaining my usual routine. Before bed, I check my phone, a habit of someone seeking reassurance. Sometimes I find myself gazing down the trail toward the hollow, half expecting two men in black to materialize on a porch swing, subtly reminding us of boundaries they politely established. I have no definitive answers, only memories, the shape of those strange lights, the way fog curved like an ethereal hand, and a lingering sense of an unsettling, unresolved encounter. I was halfway through my usual Thursday evening hunt on the ridge behind the old Thompson property in northern Vermont. My rifle hung over my shoulder, and my pack was tightened with the extra lenses and my old camera for wildlife shots. I don't typically bring photography gear during a hunt, but something felt different this time. The forest was eerily silent. No birds chirped, no squirrels rustled, just the occasional snap of a branch beneath my feet. This quiet was more than the usual pre-dusk stillness. It felt like the woods were holding their breath. Following a deer trail, I descended toward a small clearing I knew well. The path opened to a low valley with tall, usually frost-covered grass. But when I stepped into the clearing, I froze. The grass wasn't just flattened, it was burned. Not randomly, but in a precise, almost deliberate pattern. 3 perfectly circular rings, each about 6 feet wide, led to a central patch scorched down to bare dirt. A faint metallic smell hung in the air, the kind that lingers after something's been intensely heated. Slowly, I pulled out my camera to document the strange scene. Low mist softened the tree edges, making the clearing look otherworldly. As I crouched at the outer ring, trying to frame the perfect shot, movement caught my eye. 2 men emerged from the opposite tree line. They wore plain black suits, ties and shoes, moving with an unsettling, almost gliding motion. Later that night we walked beneath the moon, the valley spread below us, lights cutting their arcs. Men at the trailhead with crisp white cards asked about images like librarians seeking precise documentation. We went home, leaving an unspoken question hanging in the air, a small, neutral exchange that seemed to momentarily keep the world in order. The hollow remained unchanged. The lights continued their own rhythm, marking time in their silent, inscrutable way. The encounter started with 2 figures emerging from the fog, their movements precise and calculated. No smiles, no warmth, just cold, mechanical precision. One of them spoke, his voice devoid of emotion. Evening. Their appearance was clinical. Neat hair, clean-shaven faces, expressions locked into a blank neutrality. I was mid-photograph, camera raised, when they addressed me directly about being on private property. My response was stammering and uncertain. "I'm just hunting. I didn't know. Something felt deeply wrong." These weren't normal interactions. Talking to them was like conversing with mannequins. No natural breathing, no subtle human cues. I quickly agreed to leave, lowering my camera. They seemed fixated on the device itself. "You shouldn't have photographed this," one said. "Some things are controlled." A chill ran down my spine. I realized they'd approached silently, the fog seeming to muffle their movements. They were suddenly at the clearing's edge, moving in perfect synchronization. Questions about export controls followed, which confused me. My nervous laughter felt empty. "It's just a camera," I mumbled. The mist swirled around their feet like smoke, and the hair on my arms stood up. Backing toward the tree line, I repeated that I would leave. They didn't follow, just watched, utterly still. Then, abruptly, they vanished into the fog, melting between trees like shadows. I ran, my truck was down by the river access, and my hands shook so badly I could barely hold my keys. Looking back, the ridge was empty, just fog curling between pine trees, the clearing completely hidden. That week was surreal. Sleep became difficult. My camera now carried a weight of dread. Then, on Tuesday morning at the electronics shop I manage in Stowe, two men in black appeared, identical suits, blank faces, same deliberate movements. I froze. I was at work, sipping coffee near the front counter when two men approached. They didn't look like typical customers. The taller one asked if I had a moment. I led them to the side office, my mind racing. "Export controls," the shorter one said. Glancing at my camera repair corner, my throat went dry. They wanted to know about my drone footage, their tone making it clear this wasn't a casual conversation. They needed me to be completely truthful. I admitted I'd flown the drone near the ridge a few days earlier. Just a hobby drone, I insisted. Nothing special. They nodded, as if this was exactly what they expected to hear. Then came their demand. I must delete all footage. Tonight. No exceptions. I hesitated. The SD card was at home. They didn't raise their voices or show anger, but their message was crystal clear. I would delete the footage and I would never tell anyone about this encounter. As quickly as they'd arrived, they left. No goodbye. No explanation. That evening I sat on my couch, the SD card heavy in my hand. Something urged me to back it up to my laptop first. I was nervous, afraid of what I might see, yet equally afraid of the unknown. When I finally opened the files, the initial footage looked normal. Trees from above, a winding river, fog drifting like smoke. Then I saw it, a dark shape hovering motionlessly above the ridge. No rotors, no sound, wind whipped around, bending trees, but this object remained perfectly still. Zooming in, I saw something geometric and metallic, but without clear edges or features. Suddenly, two figures stepped into the clearing, the same men who had visited me. Black suits, black hair, expressions blank and emotionless. They simply stood watching. The shadowy object above them shifted almost imperceptibly. The men turned and vanished into the trees as quickly as they'd appeared. I closed the laptop, sitting in stunned silence. The drone was perched on the clearing's edge near my Ashland apartment complex, capturing slow pans over the river bend. Grey, windy Thursday afternoon. The kind where trees moan in the sky looks like steel wool. I'd been flying drones for years, comfortable with handling winds in quiet spots like this. While hovering above the tree line, something caught my eye. At first I thought it was a crow, but its movement defied logic. It wasn't moving at all, not up, down, or sideways, just suspended, motionless. Huge gusts were jostling branches, and my drone struggled to stay steady. Yet this dark shape remained completely still, almost blending with the cloudy backdrop. A faint metallic shimmer lined its edges, catching the last sunlight in a dull silver glint. When I tried circling with the drone to get a better view, something shifted. It tilted, or maybe I did, and suddenly it vanished. No sound, no movement, no trace in the trees where I expected something to land. My controller peeped with a low battery warning. I guided the drone back and landed it, then walked closer to the clearing's edge. Nothing was there. Now these memories haunt me. Sometimes while driving back roads at evening, I catch a dark, motionless shape beyond the tree line, like it's waiting. The men in black who appeared afterwards seemed to know something I couldn't comprehend. I tell myself it's just a coincidence, but late at night, a metallic tang lingers in the air. Those perfect grass circles remain etched in my memory, precise in a way no human could create. I haven't told anyone. Some experiences defy explanation, and some stories are better left unshared. At first, I barely noticed anything unusual, just a vague sensation that something wasn't quite right. But later that week, everything changed. Monday afternoon found me at the small electronics shop where I repair and sell drones and cameras. Two men arrived together, their appearance screaming authority, dark suits, perfectly pressed, black shoes gleaming. They moved with purpose, walking directly to the counter where I was testing a drone battery. Export controls, one of them stated flatly. No introduction, no small talk. The other man stood silently, arms crossed, watching me with an intense, unreadable gaze. They seemed to be scanning the room, waiting for me to slip up. "I'm not sure what you mean," I stammered, my voice tighter than I intended. They were asking about the drones on display, wanting to know about potential restrictions. I tried to sound casual. "It's just a consumer drone. Hobby stuff. mostly landscape photography. The first man pulled out a small notebook, scribbled something, then tore out a page and handed it to me. Check serial numbers, report any irregularities. When I asked who they were, they simply nodded and walked out as if they owned the street. My mind kept drifting back to something that had happened earlier, a strange shape hovering in the trees near my home. No footprints, no branch movement, just something. And now these mysterious men asking pointed questions about my drone. That evening I returned to the clearing, drone in hand, hoping to rationalize what I'd seen before. The wind was stronger now. As I slowly panned the tree line, filming wide passes, I saw it again. This time there was no mistaking it. My hands were shaking, and it wasn't from the morning's caffeine. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't shake the feeling that these events were connected. I didn't catch it right away. Something in the canopy's light caught my attention, a slight bend that seemed off. Suddenly, the shape crystallized, a dark form hovering maybe 50 feet above the tree line. Perfectly still, despite the wind making my drone struggle wildly. I crept closer, staying low behind a small ridge. Complete silence surrounded me. No engines, no hum, just wind rustling through trees and that impossible stillness hanging above. For 10 minutes I watched. Zooming in on my controller screen revealed nothing remarkable. No wings, no obvious propellers, just a matte dark form. The reflection struck me again. It wasn't metallic light, but something stranger, like a mirror capturing grey clouds in a way that defied logic, almost blending with the sky itself. A panicked thought seized me. What if it notices me? Why does it feel like it already has? Cold chills ran down my spine, and I nearly dropped the controller. I quickly brought the drone down and packed it away. The black-suited men returned the next day. Same intensity, no pleasantries. Serial numbers, the first one said. Notebook extended. I couldn't stay silent. I don't know what you want. I was just flying in the woods. Nothing classified, nothing secret. He stared, then wrote something, tore the page and handed it to me. Make sure you keep your footage. I blinked, confused. Keep the footage. Safe. Always copy. They left as abruptly as they'd arrived. No threats, no explanations. Back home, I reviewed the laptop footage. Mostly ordinary scenes. Trees, swaying, clouds, rolling. But in a few tiny, almost invisible frames, the shape appeared, a dark blot above the trees, reflecting light impossibly. It seemed to move fractionally, almost consciously aware of the camera. Each time I paused, it shifted slightly, as if unbound by the frame's constraints. I've returned to that clearing several times since. Everything appears normal. Wind, trees, river. The shape hasn't reappeared. Yet I can't shake thoughts of those men in black, how they knew about my drone, how they cared about my footage. Now, I'm meticulous. I double-check batteries, South Dakota cards, everything. And sometimes late at night, I wonder. The road was mostly empty that night. Just me driving home late on Route 97 north of Lake Kylon. The sky was clear, the moon high and bright. Everything was so quiet I could hear my own car's engine. The air crisp and still. After passing the turn-off for a small resort town, I was in that half-asleep driving state when something caught my eye. The lake to my right. Normally, I'd never give it a second glance, but this time was different. A single circular light rose from the water's surface, not like a splash or a boat, but something entirely unexpected. It shot straight up, faster than any plane or helicopter I'd ever seen. No sound, no ripples, just a smooth vertical streak into the sky. My heart was racing. I slammed the brakes, fishtailing a bit, gripping the wheel and staring in disbelief. The light climbed maybe 100 or 200 feet, then simply blinked out. Gone. I sat frozen for seconds before realizing I needed to keep moving, my hands shaking as I steered back onto the road. At the gas station, I tried convincing myself it was just a reflection or a boy with a strong light. But the memory wouldn't fade. I'd heard local stories about strange lights and disappearances, but this was different. I'd seen it with my own eyes. Pump 4 was occupied, and near the next pump stood two men in black suits and ties, the kind that looked stiff and cheap, like they'd stepped out of an old spy movie. One had his hands in his pockets, the other stared directly at me as I walked past. To this day, I go through the footage frame by frame. In the reflections of trees and grey sky, I sometimes see a dark shape that isn't quite there, I don't know what I saw or who those men were, but something about that night mattered enough for them to visit me twice, ensuring I kept the evidence. And I still can't explain why. I didn't think much of it at first. Gas stations attract all sorts of people late at night, but when the guy staring at me spoke, something changed. His voice was mechanical, devoid of emotion. My heart raced. "What?" I asked. "The reflection," he said, pointing toward the lake through the station windows. The surface looked calm and dark as ever. I froze as the other man watched me, waiting for a response. "Yeah, I saw something," I mumbled, feeling unsure. They nodded slowly. "Careful what you say. Not everyone understands," the first man added. I felt ridiculous. I hurried to fill my tank, trying not to stare at these two grown men in black suits, standing by the pumps in the middle of the night. When I turned back, they were gone. The pumps were empty. I checked the mirrors, no sign of them. They had vanished like smoke. Driving away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. For a mile or two, something black seemed to move in the shadows near the tree line, but each time I looked directly, it disappeared. I told myself I was imagining things, that the adrenaline was playing tricks. At work the next day, I tried to forget. I didn't mention it to anyone, not even my best friend Mike. Something held me back, a fear of sounding crazy. Yet every time I remembered the glowing object or those strange men, a quiet pressure hung in the air. A week later, I asked my younger brother Alex if he'd seen anything weird over the lake. He hesitated, then said he'd noticed a light a few nights back. It shot straight up silently. He'd assumed it was fireworks. We exchanged an uneasy look. A month passed. Nothing happened. I started believing I'd imagined the entire encounter. Then one night, driving that same stretch of Route 97, the lake dark, and still I saw something again. The night I saw the glowing object in the lake started a series of events I can't explain. There was this faint glow moving slowly toward the shore, vanishing before I could even blink. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. A few miles down the road, I stopped at a gas station, trying to calm myself. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like they were alive, and I kept checking the windows. That's when I saw them. Two men in black standing by the pumps. They weren't waving or smiling, just waiting. Something made me walk up to them, even though my chest felt tight and my legs heavy, like the ground was resisting me. The man who'd been silent the night I saw the light finally spoke. "Did you see it tonight?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my voice cracking. I think so. Something in the lake." The other man's response was simple and direct. "Keep it to yourself. No pleas, no extra words." His tone was calm, almost casual, more warning than threat. I nodded, fumbling with my wallet, hands shaking so badly I dropped coins. They didn't react, just waited. When I turned to leave and glanced back, they were gone. No car, no footprints, nothing. I couldn't understand how they disappeared so quickly. Driving home, the encounter consumed my thoughts. I told no one. Over the next few months, I watched the lake whenever I drove by at night. Sometimes I saw a flicker, a faint reflection, movement in the water. Other times, nothing. Each time I half expected to see them in their black suits, waiting, but they never reappeared at the gas stations. Yet the memory lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. Were they just people or something else? The light's movement, rising silently from the lake, haunted me. I tried to rationalize it. A trick of light, an overactive imagination, maybe a drone prank. But the part of me that felt their gaze that night, the quiet pressure in the air, the sense that they knew I'd seen something, that part never went away. Sometimes, driving past the lake after dark, I still feel like someone's watching from the shadows, waiting. The summer evening was thick with heat as Marcus, Leia, and I walked home along the dirt road bordering Eagle Ridge. Dark blue mountains stretched across the horizon, almost like shadows, while the landscape settled into a quiet stillness after a scorching day. We were laughing about something trivial when Hilar suddenly pointed upward. At first glance, I thought it might be a small training plane, but something was different. The object moved with impossible speed, zipping between mountain ridges, darting behind peaks, then shooting straight up into the sky and vanishing in an instant. "Holy, did you see that?" Marcus whispered. We stood frozen, watching the sky, which remained bright enough to outline the mountain peaks and winding road. No sound followed, no motor, no jet engine, just silence. The walk home was tense, each of us trying to appear normal but clearly unsettled. I kept trying to rationalize what we'd seen, convincing myself it was just a drone or unusual aircraft, but deep down I knew it wasn't. The next day at school, something felt off. In the guidance counselor's office, two bald men in black suits sat quietly, looking nothing like any staff I'd ever seen. Mrs. Pear Eversea. Halbrook was nowhere around. They were calling students in individually, one after another. Waiting outside, I watched students return looking strange, not upset exactly, but with a weird frozen energy. Their responses were cryptic, "Yeah, just answer questions." "Okay." When my turn came, one man gestured me to sit. "Have you noticed anything unusual recently?" he asked, his voice precise and measured. When I hesitated, he clarified, "Disturbances in the sky? Sounds? Lights? Movements that don't match conventional aircraft?" My mind raced. Was he asking about that night? I tried to sound casual. Yeah, maybe. The first time I noticed something strange was over the mountains. It darted fast, making no sound, then disappeared into the sky. When I told the men about it, I kept my voice steady, even though my hands were sweaty. Two men interviewed me, scribbling notes in their pad. They asked about witnesses, and I mentioned my two friends. After a brief exchange, they seemed satisfied. I left their office feeling uneasy, not exactly scared, but with a heavy sense that something was lurking just beneath the surface of everyday life. In the days that followed, things got weirder. Dark-suited men began appearing in unexpected places. They'd be standing at parking lot edges, lingering near trees behind the football field, always vanishing the moment I looked directly at them. Then the humming started. Late one night while reading in my bedroom, I heard a low, constant, pulsating sound. It wasn't loud, but it vibrated in a way that lightly shook the windows. I couldn't tell if it was the heater or a transformer. The next morning, Maya confirmed she'd heard it too, though Marcus hadn't noticed anything. I tried recording the sound on my phone. The audio was strange, a constant low thrum with occasional skips, like the sound flickered for a fraction of a second. Listening to the recording made my chest feel tight. A few nights later, an unexpected knock came at the door. My parents were asleep, and I hadn't told anyone about the humming. Two bald men in black suits and sunglasses stood there. Their presence filled the room with an odd pressure. "Have you experienced any audio disturbances?" one asked calmly. When I hesitated, they pressed me to describe everything, the times, duration, and other witnesses. I shared what I knew about the nights I'd recorded the hum, Laya hearing it, and the light I'd seen in the mountains. They listened silently, occasionally making notes. I live in a small, older house on the edge of town in northern Wisconsin, surrounded by dense pine woods. Late July, but still sticky and warm. Windows cracked open to let some air in. I was already up late that night, sitting at the kitchen table with a half-empty cup of coffee after a long week at the plant. Restlessness hung in the air. Then it began. Faint at first, like a distant engine idling, but something wasn't right. A steady, low hum that seemed to breathe, swelling and shrinking. My windows rattled lightly with each pulse. I pressed my hand against the glass. The vibrations went right through me. Outside on the back porch, I scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. Weeks later, the men gave me a neutral look after I finished my notes. "Keep this to yourself," the first man said. "Don't discuss it with anyone else." They left abruptly. The door clicked shut. I stood staring at the blank hallway. The humming didn't stop, though it got weaker that night and vanished completely a week later. Reviewing the recording, I noticed something strange. For the last few seconds of every clip, the sound disappeared. Then the audio warped slightly, like something invisible brushed past the microphone. Weeks later, I saw them again at the grocery store. Black clothes, sunglasses, standing by the vegetables, as if they belonged there. When I looked away and back, they were gone. School returned to normal. Friends joked about nothing. But I noticed the mountains more often. At dusk, I'd catch a flicker darting between the ridges, too fast for a plane, too precise for birds. I said nothing, just watched. Now, lying in bed at night, I think about those knocks, the questions, the notes they took. I wonder if they ever came for Laya or Marcus, or if they only needed me. I've never heard from them again, but sometimes, when the air is still and the mountains are dark against the sky, I swear I hear it. That low hum, faint, pulsating like the world is holding its breath, and I know I'll hear it again, even if no one else ever does. The night was still empty of noise, no deer, no cars, not even a raccoon wandering around. An odd hum hung in the air, without any clear source or direction. I grabbed my phone, thinking Kevin, my buddy who knows audio equipment, might help me figure it out. Leaving the phone on the railing, I let it record for about 3 minutes before it abruptly stopped, plunging everything into silence. When I played back the recording, the sound was there, faint but unmistakable. The same pulsing vibration that had earlier rattled my windows. I listened repeatedly, trying to make sense of it. At first, I wondered if it was underground construction or a transformer issue, but nothing nearby matched that sound. The next morning, I asked Harold, my older neighbor, if he'd heard anything. He hadn't. He slept through the night, and no one at the factory mentioned anything unusual. Then, around 9 that evening, while washing dishes, a knock interrupted me. I was hesitant to answer, given the late hour. When I finally opened the door, 2 men stood before me, tall, dressed identically in crisp black suits, white shirts, and black ties. Their appearance was immaculate, like they'd stepped out of a professional photo shoot. No badges, no identification. "Evening," the first man said. "We're checking with residents. Have you had any audio disturbances lately?" Something about the phrasing struck me as odd. Not "did you hear something strange?" but audio disturbances. When I asked who they were, he replied, "Federal Survey Group. We're documenting unusual occurrences." His smile didn't reach his eyes. I mentioned the hum from the previous night, carefully avoiding any reference to my recording. Both men nodded subtly, as if this was precisely what they'd expected. The second man remained silent, holding a notebook, but making no notes. "Did you record it?" the first man asked. I froze. How did they know? I denied it. They exchanged an unreadable look. If it happens again, the first man warned, "Please do not attempt to capture it. Just make a note of the time." As quickly as they'd arrived, they turned and walked away, moving in perfect sync down the street. No car waited. They simply melted into the pine shadows, leaving me stunned. I couldn't sleep after they left. The entire encounter had been brief, maybe 3 minutes, but it left me deeply unsettled. How could they have known about the recording? I hadn't told a soul. Every sound became menacing that night. Creaks in the house, distant cars. I kept scanning the windows, expecting to see someone standing out there. Nothing. When morning came, I tried to play the recording again. The file was gone. It was still listed on my phone, timestamp 2:03 a.m., but when I tapped it, the player claimed, "File cannot be opened." I attempted connecting the phone to my laptop. Same result. The file existed, yet was empty. I haven't heard the hum again, but those men haunt my thoughts. Late at night, shadows at the forest edge seemed to move. 2 figures, walking slowly, silently. I never step outside to investigate. A week has passed since their visit. My mind keeps replaying everything, the hum that seemed to exist everywhere simultaneously, the recording that vanished, the men who knew about it before I spoke a word. I've returned to work, trying to restore normalcy, but something always watching. Windows stay closed now, even during hot nights. In quiet moments I sense that pulse again. Faint but real, vibrating beneath the house's skin. I don't discuss this with anyone. People label such experiences as madness, yet I can't dismiss it. Every night I check the clock, the windows, anticipating their return. The sound. The file's reappearance. My phone stays on the counter now, just in case. When pine needles rustle in certain winds, the air seems to hum. Are they out there, waiting? This feeling isn't screaming terror loud. It's subtler, underneath everything. I've attempted rationalizing. Electrical anomalies, mental tricks, a truck's subwoofer. But I know what I heard. I know what happened. And since that night, nothing feels the same. I was pushing a mop through the main lobby around 3:30 a.m., finishing my last round at the industrial park. The fluorescent lights buzzed in that low, uneven rhythm of old fixtures, and the HV's hum made the building feel like it was breathing. Early September nights carry a strange mix of late summer warmth and sudden sharp cold whenever a door opens. My headphones played an old country station, just enough to distract me from the overwhelming silence. It was always quiet that late, but this night felt different, emptier, somehow more unsettling. When I stepped out of the east side service door to grab trash from the loading dock, something immediately felt off. The parking lot looked exactly the same as always, empty, quiet, but something was wrong. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought someone had slipped from a car or was hiding behind a truck. A figure glowed faintly pale and white, moving across the lot in an unsure way. Not walking, but sliding, almost floating above the ground. I froze. The shape was vaguely human, wrapped in light or fog. I squinted, thinking maybe the security lights were playing tricks. But every overhead light was steady, and this glow matched nothing around me. It passed behind a line of trailers and vanished completely. No sound, no gravel crunch, no engine, nothing. I stood there staring, waiting for it to reappear. My first thought was that I'd imagined it, maybe a strange reflection or shadow trick. But my gut knew different. That cold, tight twist in my stomach told me this was real. Now I live with the memory, always watching. The blinds stay closed, doors locked. Every passing car makes me look out, half expecting someone in a black suit. And though I haven't heard that strange hum again, sometimes when the house settles, I feel a vibration under my feet, just beneath the floorboards. A pulse, a sound that shouldn't exist. I don't understand what happened. I can't explain it. All I know is something did happen, and it left its mark on me. It was just another early morning shift. Around 5 a.m., I stepped outside to secure the east doors, and that's when I noticed something odd. The small car sat parked on the far side of the lot, completely still. No headlights, no running engine. This wasn't there when I arrived at 11 p.m., and nobody was around. At first, I brushed it off. The parking lot was large, and sometimes people would park to rest or take a break. Finished locking up and returned to my car, an uneasy feeling growing in my chest. As the sun began to rise around 6 a.m., casting a pale light across the lot, I spotted two men standing right next to my car. They wore brand new black suits with pressed hats, their faces eerily pale and almost blank in the dawn light. I didn't recognize them from anywhere. "Morning," one said, his voice unnervingly calm and scripted. "Were the security lights malfunctioning last night?" I stammered. "No, I don't think so. Everything looked fine." The second man nodded slowly. "Good. We just wanted to check. It's easy for things to go unnoticed when a building is empty." They stared at me, unmoving, waiting. My throat went dry. "You're the janitor?" the first one asked. When I confirmed they pressed nothing unusual, I hesitated. The memory of the glowing figure flickered in my mind. Something about their too calm demeanor made me feel that speaking up might be dangerous. So I simply shook my head. "Good. Have a safe day," they said, walking away with an unnaturally smooth, synchronized pace until they vanished behind some trailers. Sitting in my car, I couldn't shake the strange encounter. The lot had been empty. No cameras had captured anything out of yet the image of the glowing figure and these mysterious men lingered. When I got home, I told my wife, but she seemed uninterested. I've worked this night shift for 2 years, and nothing like that had ever happened before. Usually the most interesting thing was a raccoon knocking over a trash bin or some trucker stopping for coffee before dawn. But that morning was different. I drove past the park that afternoon. Everything looked normal. The lights worked. The lot was empty. But those two men kept haunting my thoughts. Their timing, their questions, nothing about them felt right. I tried convincing myself they were just contractors or security inspectors, but something was off. A week later, I asked a co-worker if anyone had been in the lot early that morning. He shook his head. "Nope, didn't see anyone unusual." "You sure you weren't dreaming?" he asked. Now, I catch myself looking for them, driving past the park at night, checking the lot. Strange reflections in windows, shadows moving too smoothly. Once, I thought I saw a glowing figure on the edge of the tree line behind the trailers, but it vanished before I could get close. I haven't seen those men again, and I'm not sure I want to. But every time I pass that lot or hear the hum of those old fluorescent lights, a tight, cold feeling comes back. Most nights after my shift walking out to my car, I keep thinking about it. The figure, the men, the questions, they replay in my mind. What did they want to know about the lights, about me, about the lot? I keep telling myself I imagined it all. Maybe I did, but I know what I saw. Those men were real enough to stand there at dawn, like the world hadn't even noticed them. Now I drive past the lot slower, windows up, lights on. When I have to go inside at night, I park under a street lamp, just in case. Sometimes if I catch the corner of my eye just right, I swear I can see that same pale glow sliding across the lot. I remember that morning, how the world felt small, quiet, and like it wasn't entirely mine. I never tell anyone at work, never bring it up, but with every shift I finish, every quiet lot I leave, I feel the weight of their gaze. Even when I'm alone, I can't shake the memory. The long road seemed to stretch endlessly, blending into a monotonous drive. My playlist hummed softly in the background, just loud enough to keep me alert. Gradually, even the music faded into the steady rhythm of tires against asphalt. That's when I first noticed it. A single point of light, impossibly bright for a star. It wasn't high in the sky, but lower, almost as if it were following me. Through the windshield I caught glimpses of this strange light. Initially I dismissed it as a plane, a reflection, or simply my tired eyes playing tricks after hours of driving through darkness. But the light remained. It tracked me relentlessly, keeping pace no matter how many turns I made or how straight the highway stretched. I checked my mirrors repeatedly, searching for an explanation, perhaps a car with an unusually bright headlight. Nothing. No other vehicles, no lights. Just that single white point moving alongside me. By mile marker 112, unease had settled deep into my bones. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, and a cold sweat beaded on my neck. My heart thundered so loudly I felt self-conscious, as if its beating might echo through the car's interior. Pulling over seemed tempting, but I rationalized my fear. It was just a light, after all. When the rest stop appeared, I didn't hesitate. I slowed down, turned into the lot, and parked at its edge where the overhead lights barely reached. The engine ticked softly as it cooled, and the radio fell silent. Staring out at the desert, I noticed them. Two men seated on a bench near the payphone. Black suits, black ties, black fedoras, standard attire, yet something felt distinctly wrong. They weren't speaking, they weren't interacting with anyone. They simply sat, perfectly still, staring ahead as if they'd been waiting specifically for me. I realized I'd been staring too long. One of them slowly tilted his head, not in greeting, but with the detached curiosity of a cat observing in clumsy movement. Attempting to shake off my growing unease, I tried to laugh it off. Exhaustion, I told myself. The desert was playing tricks on my mind. I stepped out to stretch, the night colder than expected. Stars dotted the sky as usual, but one light caught my attention. It hovered directly above the parking lot, hanging still, as if waiting. My feet moved slowly, almost against my will, while a strange sense of unease crept over me. Two men sat on a bench nearby. One shifted his weight in a way that wasn't quite natural, smooth and deliberate, as if aware of my every glance. I muttered, "Evening," out of some instinctive politeness, but received no response. Not a nod, not a twitch. I told myself I was imagining things and walked back to my car, repeatedly glancing over my shoulder. The men remained perfectly motionless on the bench, watching. That peculiar light seemed to have inched closer, though I couldn't be certain. My pulse quickened. Sliding into the car, I locked the doors and stared at the lot. The men hadn't moved. The light remained, now blindingly white like a spotlight, with no visible source, no wires, no reflection, no aircraft. Just a pure, steady glow. I started the engine, pretending to scroll through my phone to justify my departure. When I finally pulled out, something made me stop breathing. The bench was empty. No men, no signs of movement. Not behind a bush, not near a car, nowhere. They had simply vanished. Back on the highway, I drove carefully in the center lane, scanning my mirrors. The light had disappeared too, leaving only empty desert. My heart gradually slowed, but tension lingered in my shoulders. Silence filled the car as I tried to make sense of what I'd experienced. That light had followed me for miles. The men had seemed to know exactly where I would stop, as if waiting. I attempted to rationalize, maybe an art project, pranksters in suits, a distant plane landing. But nothing explained what I'd seen. Nothing fit. Years later, I still can't shake the memory. Those long highway drives always bring it back, my eyes darting to the mirrors, half expecting that distant pinpoint of light. Dark, quiet stretches trigger something in me, a shadow on the shoulder, something perfectly still, watching. I never stop at that rest area anymore. It happened on a hot August night around 2 in the morning. Unable to sleep, I was sitting on the couch in my small-town Ohio duplex, windows cracked open trying to get some air moving. The sound started unexpectedly, at first just like a distant truck, idling, or late-night machinery. But this was different, a low, steady hum with an unusual pulse. Not quite like a concert space, but something more physical. My windows actually rattled with each rhythmic swell. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. No specific direction. I walked to the kitchen window and looked out. Dead quiet. No cars, no people. Grabbing my phone, I started recording, thinking I'd send it to my buddy Kevin, who does sound work. Maybe he could identify it. 2 minutes of recording, then suddenly silence. Complete silence. No crickets, nothing. I replayed the clip repeatedly, hearing that faint but clear low vibration with its strange rhythmic swelling. A power issue? Nothing felt right. I went to bed uneasy. The next morning, I checked with my upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Senateem and Mrs. Headywell Suze Patel. She hadn't heard a thing. I didn't tell anyone for a while, even debating whether to call the police, but there was nothing to report, no crime, no explanation. Weeks later, driving back through that same desert stretch at the same time, I scanned the horizon. Nothing. Empty desert. Just me, the asphalt, and the stars. That evening, around 9 o'clock, I was home again, halfway through a sandwich when a knock came at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I was surprised to find 2 men standing there. They looked like they'd stepped out of an old photo, both tall, dressed identically in black suits, white shirts, and black ties. No badges, no clipboards, nothing to suggest who they were or why they were on my porch. One of them spoke immediately. "Good evening. We're checking with residents in the area. Have you had any audio disturbances lately?" The phrasing caught me off guard. Not did you hear a noise, but audio disturbances. I asked who they were with. The first man gave a quick, mirthless smile and said they were from a federal survey group, just needing to confirm if I'd noticed anything unusual. I hesitated, not wanting to mention the recording right away. I told them I'd heard a low humming sound the night before. Both men nodded slightly, as if that was exactly what they'd anticipated. The second man, who hadn't spoken, pulled out a small notepad but didn't write anything down, just held it. "Did you record it?" the first one asked. That made me go cold. I hadn't mentioned recording anything. Playing dumb, I said I just noticed it for a couple of minutes. They exchanged a quick look. Then the first man told me, "If it happens again, please do not attempt to capture it. Just make a note of the time." As if that settled everything, they stepped back, thanked me for my cooperation, and walked down the driveway. There was no car parked out front when I'd opened the door. By the time I leaned out to check, they were already halfway down the street, walking side by side in silence. I immediately shut and locked the door. The entire encounter lasted less than 3 minutes, but it left me deeply unsettled. How did they know I'd recorded something? Nobody else knew, not even Kevin. I hadn't sent in the clip yet. That night, I sat in the dark with my phone, waiting for the hum to return. It didn't. But every passing car, every house creak made me feel like someone was outside, listening. The next day, when I finally gathered the courage to play the recording, I realized something was different. I do car work in a little garage outside Lincoln, Nebraska, and sometimes jobs run late into the night. That evening I'd been fixing a transmission for a customer who needed his truck by morning. By the time I cleaned up and locked up, the streets were empty and the air hung heavy with late summer humidity. My route home follows county roads, flat stretches bordered by endless cornfields, where you can drive 10 minutes without seeing another vehicle. Windows down halfway and radio low. I was just trying to unwind after a long day. About 10 minutes into the drive, a strange glow caught my eye on the right side of the road. Initially I thought it might be farm equipment, but something felt off. It wasn't the harsh yellow of headlights or the red of tail lights. Instead, it was a soft whitish blue light, steady and even, spread out wider than typical work lights. As I got closer, I realized the glow was coming from the middle of a cornfield. I slowed the truck, pulled onto the gravel shoulder, and cut the engine. For about 50 yards away, I could see the corn rows illuminated, each stalk casting sharp shadows. Then I saw it, not a tractor, but something completely unfamiliar. A flat disc, roughly 30 feet across, sitting between the rows. The light wasn't shining onto it. It was emanating from the surface itself, the metal seemingly glowing faintly. I sat in the truck's cab for a solid minute, just staring. My phone was back at the shop, charging, so I was completely alone. Part of me wanted to investigate, while another part urged me to drive home and forget what I'd seen. Curiosity ultimately won out, and I prepared to get a closer look. Later, when I tried to record what happened, something strange occurred. The audio file appeared on my phone, time-stamped at 2:07 a.m., but when I attempted to play it, only an error message showed. Connecting the phone to my computer yielded the same result. The file existed, but was empty, showing 0 seconds. I haven't heard that mysterious hum again since that night. But sometimes, when I'm up late, I'll catch a glimpse of what might be two figures standing just at the edge of the shadows across the street. I never go out to confirm. I hopped back into the truck and returned to the same spot, but the strange glow had vanished. Rolling down the gravel shoulder, I scanned the area carefully. The mysterious disc was gone, and instead, two men stood near the field's edge where I'd stopped earlier. Their appearance was off. Black jackets, dark pants, they weren't typical farmers. No reflective vests, no caps, no flashlights. They just stood motionless, facing the road. As I slowed, one raised a hand in a half-hearted wave, signaling me to stop. Against my instincts, I lowered the window. The man who'd waved approached, close enough for me to see his face in the moonlight. Mid-40s, pale skin, clean-shaven, his expression remained unchanged as he spoke. "Fields closed spraying," he claimed. No greeting, no further explanation. I looked past him into the corn rows. No equipment, no tanks, no lights, no engine sounds, just dark corn swaying in the night breeze. I asked about the light I'd seen, but he repeated his monotone message about field closure. The other man stood a few feet back, hands at his sides, staring silently. I sensed he was older, and neither seemed to belong in a cornfield at midnight. Nodding and muttering an apology, I put the truck in gear and rolled away. In the rearview mirror, both men remained standing, watching me leave. By the time I got home, my mind was racing. The glow haunted me, how unnatural it looked, how it seemed to illuminate the corn from underneath. But the men disturbed me even more. They appeared so suddenly, like they'd been waiting. Their explanation made no sense. Farmers don't spray fields at night without machinery or lights. The next day, I drove the same road in daylight. The field looked completely normal. Rows intact, no tracks, no burning, no equipment. I slowed at the spot where I'd seen the glow, searching for any trace of what had happened. I usually run at night after work, around 10 or so. The park near my place in Northern Virginia has a decent trail that loops through some woods and back around a big open field, maybe 2 miles total. It's not lit, but I always bring a headlamp. Most nights it's empty except for the occasional dog walker. This was early October, one of those clear, cool nights where every star was visible. I'd left my phone in the car, which I almost never do, wanting a break from music. It was quiet, except for my footsteps and the crickets. About halfway through my second lap, I slowed down when I hit the open field. I like to look up at the sky when I pass that part, because it's the only stretch without trees. I stopped jogging, leaned over with my hands on my knees to catch my breath, and tilted my head back. That's when I noticed something strange. A patch of stars, maybe the size of my hand, shifted a little. At first I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks after running, but I stood there a while and saw it again. The stars weren't twinkling like the rest. They were duller, almost faint, like they were behind a film of glass. And the whole patch moved, sliding a few inches to the left, then stopping dead still. I kept blinking, trying to make sense of it. I thought maybe a cloud had drifted in, but there weren't any clouds. The rest of the sky was sharp and clear. I turned off my headlamp just to check. With the light gone, it was even more obvious. This section of sky wasn't lining up with the rest. It was like someone had taken a square cutout and was dragging it across the stars. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I got uncomfortable. Not scared exactly, just this deep sense of wrongness, like I wasn't supposed to be looking at it. I switched the headlamp back on and forced myself to keep running. Since then, I've driven past that field many times, never seeing anything like it again. But late at night, I'll sometimes slow down without realizing it, scanning for any strange light in the rose-colored landscape. And every time, I half expect to see two men standing there, waiting. Years ago, I thought I saw a faint ring in the dirt between the cornrows. Maybe it was just where the irrigation had cut deeper. I didn't get out to check. But the memory lingers. Like a whisper just beyond understanding, the empty parking lot looked nothing like it had the night before. By day, families walked dogs, kids rode bikes, and everything seemed perfectly ordinary. But the previous evening was anything but normal. I'd finished my running loop and was looking forward to going home. As I rounded the last bend, I stopped cold. Two men were leaning against my car, not typical late-night park visitors. Their black jackets, pants and shoes looked too deliberate, too precise. No running gear, no water bottles, just waiting. I slowed down, uncertain. They remained motionless. When I approached, one spoke with unsettling calmness. "Enjoy the illusion." Those exact words. I stood there, still catching my breath, trying to understand. They weren't smiling or threatening, just blank. The taller one studied me like I was some curious specimen. I asked what they meant. Silence. The first guy repeated his cryptic statement. "Did you enjoy the illusion?" My nerves were fraying. My keys sat in my shorts pouch, and I kept touching them, ready to unlock the car. They blocked my path. When I said I needed to leave, the taller man stepped aside slowly, never breaking his stare. The other remained by the driver's door. I clicked the fob. The sudden flash and beep startled me. The man moved, giving me space to enter. I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine immediately. One of them leaned down to my window, not knocking, just bringing his face level with mine. Dark glasses obscured his eyes, but I felt his intense gaze. "Best not to look up too long," he said. Then they turned in perfect synchronization and walked straight into the dark woods, not toward a car or street, but directly into the trees. I idled, watching the trailhead, half expecting them to reappear. They didn't. My hands trembled on the steering wheel during the entire drive home. The next morning, I returned to verify my experience was real, but in the bright daylight, nothing seemed out of place. The morning was muted, with fog blanketing the water out of Booth Bay Harbor. Late September still offered warmth for solo fishing, and I'd taken my small 20-foot lobster boat past the usual spots. No trap running today, just dropping nets to see what might come up before the season slowed. Everything felt dampened, the engine's hum, the gulls' cries, even the waves against the hull seemed hushed by the thick mist. Around 8, I pulled in my first net, mostly seaweed and a couple of undersized cod I tossed back. The second haul was different, coming up heavy and uneven. Initially I thought I'd caught some rocks or an old trap, but when I dragged it aboard, a strange metallic object was tangled in the mesh. Not quite round, more an oval about basketball-sized with odd seams running across its surface. The metal looked dull, almost like brushed steel, with scorched patches. When I knocked on it, it felt unexpectedly hollow and light, not like typical metal. I figured it might be airplane debris or a broken buoy. As I leaned closer, trying to spot any markings, another engine sound broke through the fog. Nothing unusual out here, but this sound grew quickly. A sleek black boat with no visible name or registration slid up. Two men in black jackets and caps stood aboard, their clothing looking almost like uniforms without insignia. Both wore sunglasses. Absurd in the thick fog, one shouted, "You pulled something that doesn't belong to you." I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke, but their faces were dead serious. They pulled alongside, close enough that I could see every detail of their stern expressions. The driver spoke firmly, "That's military property. I'd been out fishing like any other morning, nets in the water, nothing special. Then I pulled something metal from the nets, something that caught my eye immediately. Before I could even process what it was, two strangers showed up in a black boat with no lights, moving like they'd been waiting for me. They demanded the object, repeating it's military debris. "We'll be taking it." When I asked who they were, their approach felt calculated and strange. No identification, no explanation, just a flat instruction that I wasn't to question them. I suggested calling the Coast Guard to verify, hoping to buy some time and understand what was happening. The atmosphere shifted instantly. One of them leaned in and told me coldly, "You didn't see this. Understand." Then the other climbed onto my deck, uninvited, picked up the metal object with a practiced precision, and carried it back to their boat. They handled it almost reverently, setting it down carefully. Something about their movements made me deeply uneasy. They were too smooth, too rehearsed. One moment they were there, the next the fog swallowed them completely. Their engine noise faded, leaving nothing but silence. Later, details kept gnawing at me. No lights on their boat, a massive safety violation. How did they find me so quickly in the vast ocean? No other vessels around, no signs of tracking, yet they appeared the instant I pulled the object from my nets. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Back at the harbor, I wanted to tell someone, but the words wouldn't come. How could I describe this without sounding completely unhinged? Two mysterious men, a strange metal object, a boat that appeared and vanished like a ghost. It all seemed impossible to explain. I spent most nights on the road, hauling freight across quiet highways. This particular run was west on I-80, leaving Fort Wayne around 3 a.m. in mid-May. The night was cool and clear, with long stretches of empty highway punctuated by occasional passing headlights. Something strange happened during that trip. Outside Ottawa, about 15 miles east, a weird glow appeared ahead. At first, I figured it was construction lighting stationary and hanging low over the highway, maybe 50 feet above the asphalt. When I slowed down and leaned closer, I realized this wasn't any standard light tower. The object was triangular, with 3 white points marking its corners and a faint glow connecting them. Its shape was unnaturally precise. Nothing like any aircraft I'd encountered before. This wasn't the first odd occurrence I'd experienced. Weeks earlier, a dark sedan had been acting suspiciously near my home. It would crawl past my house, pause at the end of the lane with its lights off, and then silently drift away. The first 2 nights, I dismissed it as a lost tourist. But by the third evening, I was watching through my blinds. That night, 2 shadowy figures sat in the front seats, unmoving, just watching my house. I stopped going out alone after that, staying closer to shore when I took my boat out. Though I never clearly saw their faces, the memory lingered. Even now, months later, I'll sometimes catch a car in my rearview mirror that seems to follow me a bit too long before turning away. And I can't forget how they appeared so suddenly that morning, emerging from the fog like they'd been waiting, tracking me, knowing exactly what I would do before I did it. I rolled down the highway, midnight dark and empty, when something caught my eye. A massive triangle hung motionless above the road, completely silent and unnaturally still. My truck's headlights revealed a metallic surface, smooth as polished stone. Heart racing, I eased into the left lane, passing underneath. Suddenly, my CB erupted with harsh static that made me jump, and dashboard lights flickered wildly. In the rearview mirrors, the triangle remained suspended, slowly shrinking into the distance. I gripped the wheel tightly, scanning the sky and mirrors for any sign of movement. Nothing came. By the time I reached the service yard around 5 a.m., I'd said nothing to anyone about what I'd seen. The next night found me at a truck stop outside Joliet, following my usual routine. Late, with the diner nearly empty, I slid into a booth and ordered coffee and eggs. That's when I noticed them. 2 men sitting directly across from me, wearing identical black suits that seemed oddly precise. Plain, unwrinkled, with white shirts buttoned to the top. They sat perfectly still, hands folded, not eating or drinking. Their posture was unnatural, heads angled, just enough that I knew they were watching me. Every time I looked up, they hadn't moved an inch. Not a word between them, not a single gesture. When the waitress brought my coffee refill, I asked her quietly about the men. She glanced over, confused. Who? When I pointed out the booth, she looked at me like I was playing some kind of joke. No one was there. I nodded, stirred my coffee, and kept my head down. The night shift dragged on, quiet and uneventful, until something caught my eye on camera 12. It was just after 2 in the morning at the distribution warehouse, a massive complex with 15 loading bays and about 3 acres of fenced property. Most nights were dead silent, but this one felt different. The weather was clear and cold, with occasional wind gusts that hadn't triggered any motion sensors. As I sipped my stale coffee, I noticed something odd in the far corner of the southern yard. At first I thought the camera was malfunctioning, but when I leaned closer, I realized something was definitely there. A shape sat low behind the fence line near the trees, unlike any truck or object I'd ever seen. It didn't cast shadows the way it should, and instead emitted a soft, pulsing whitish glow. Not like a spotlight or headlight, but something entirely strange. Later that night, I stopped at a roadside diner. The tension from the warehouse camera never left me. I ate quickly, hyper-aware of two men in a nearby booth. They sat motionless, hands folded, facing forward. As I passed their table, neither looked up. Outside, the parking lot was silent, except for a rumbling reefer unit. When I glanced back, the booth was mysteriously empty. No chime of the door, no footsteps, no car pulling away, just gone. Back in my truck, I locked the doors and noticed something peculiar. My logbook, which I knew I'd been writing in during dinner, now showed a blank page, completely clean, as if I'd never touched it. Driving through the night, I constantly checked my mirrors. Every set of headlights made me tense, but nothing followed me. The next morning at a rest area, I confirmed the logbook was still untouched. Now I avoid fueling at that stop, and when I see a triangle of lights in the sky, I keep my eyes firmly on the road. The yard was empty, but something had been there moments ago. I'd been watching camera 12 intently, seeing this solid, unmoving glow. Checking the other cameras, I noticed it wasn't visible on cameras 13 or 14, which made sense given the blocked angles from storage containers. My impulse was to snap a photo with my phone, but something held me back. I watched, frozen, for maybe half a minute. Then the glow shifted, a tilt or rotation, but without a sound, absolutely nothing. At that distance, any truck or machinery would have made noise, but there was only silence. In less than a blink, it vanished. No gradual fade, no movement, just gone. While I was still staring at the empty yard, the front gate camera triggered. An unmarked van with no readable plates pulled up outside the security office. This was unusual. We never get unannounced visitors, especially not at 2 a.m. in an unmarked vehicle. Two men emerged, dressed identically in black suits, white shirts, and black ties. They didn't look like typical workers or inspectors. The taller one had an almost greyish-pale complexion and a narrow face. His companion kept his head down, seemingly studying the ground. Neither showed any emotion. I buzzed the intercom. "Can I help you?" The tall man looked directly at the camera. "We need access to the southern loading bay," he said in a flat, emotionless tone. That statement stopped me. The southern loading bay isn't on any public map. It's an older, unused section hidden behind newer expansions. We keep it locked with no scheduled deliveries. As far as I knew, only management and security knew its name. When I hesitated, he repeated the request exactly. I asked about their affiliation. The shorter man glanced at his companion, then simply said, "Time-sensitive matter." Every instinct screamed not to let them in. They weren't the type you could easily refuse. Completely still, they waited with an unsettling patience. I said I'd call my supervisor. "We've already spoken to him," the tall man stated. I knew this was a lie. Dennis, our on-call supervisor, lived 2 towns away and would have informed me about any visitors. Night shifts can make you hyper-aware of every little sound. That evening started off like any other, quiet and predictable. Then the van arrived. The 2 men approached the security door. The shorter one stood close to the glass, his eyes unlike anything I'd seen before, flat and dark, not catching the light like normal eyes do. I'd watched countless people come through those doors, but these guys were different. I told them I couldn't let them in without proper clearance and reached for the phone. Before I could say anything more, they simply turned and walked back to their van. No arguments, no threats, just a calm, calculated retreat. The van pulled away smoothly, rolling down the access road without headlights until the darkness swallowed it completely. I checked the road cameras, but they never appeared. Strange, because the road only has 2 turns before hitting the highway. Back on camera 12, the yard remained empty and still. Every creak of the building made me jump for the rest of my shift. When Dennis arrived at 6 to take over, I described the incident. He looked at me like I was joking. No visitors were logged, no calls had come in. We reviewed the gate camera feed. The recording for that time slot was simply gone, marked as a corrupted file. Camera 12 was black for about 4 minutes right after I first noticed something odd. After that, I kept quiet. Sometimes when I'm outside at night, I can't help looking toward that distant corner, half expecting to see that pale light pulsing in the darkness. My flying career spanned over a decade, mostly charter and sightseeing flights. That particular afternoon was typical, a short trip from Billings to a private airstrip near Sheridan. The sky was cold and clear, with a thin layer of high clouds. The winter light had that washed-out, silvery quality that comes when the sun can't quite break through. About 30 minutes before landing, something caught my eye. Initially, I thought it was just an unusual cloud formation catching sunlight. But it moved quickly. A metallic disc dropped vertically from the cloud layer, perfectly steady. It stopped mid-air for maybe 2 seconds, then shot off horizontally, vanishing into the mountain haze. No sound, no trail, nothing. It happened so fast I barely had time to process what I'd seen. The airstrip felt eerily silent as I landed. My plane touched down smoothly with everything reading normal on the instruments. As I taxied toward the hangar, 2 men caught my eye standing just inside the building's shadow. They were dressed identically, black suits, white shirts, dark ties, no coats. Strange, given the cold 25 degrees temperature. One tall and lean, the other shorter and broader. Both looked pale, like they'd been avoiding sunlight for months. They didn't move as I shut down the engine and climbed out. The taller one approached first, speaking in a flat, almost robotic tone. "Harlan," he said. The shorter man held a clipboard with several sheets attached. "We understand you observed an aerial anomaly during your approach," the shorter man stated. I froze. I hadn't reported anything. How did they know? "I saw something," I admitted. "Not sure what exactly. That's why we're here," the taller one responded. "Standard procedure for atmospheric interference reports in controlled airspace." He handed me a pen and flipped the clipboard my way. The form was filled with dense text. I caught glimpses of phrases like atmospheric interference and no threat to flight safety. They wanted me to sign, essentially confirming whatever I'd seen was a known atmospheric effect. No mention of an aircraft. No mention of anything unidentified. "Who are you with?" I asked. "Federal jurisdiction," the shorter man replied, as if that explained everything. The wind picked up, rattling the hangar doors. I noticed the airstrip was deserted. No ground crew, no fuel truck driver, just us. "I don't feel comfortable signing without understanding," I said. "You saw atmospheric interference," the taller one stated. Not a question. His voice carried a strange, weighted certainty. "I saw a metallic object." I counted slowly. The shorter man stepped closer. Something about the air felt different that night. "I'm Len Ortiz, a photographer who spent years chasing the perfect lightning shot. This wasn't just another storm chase. The evening was humid and still, with power lines stretching across an open field just outside the city limits. I'd photographed this spot before, but something felt off. The silence was unnatural. No crickets chirped. No wind moved the grass. The air hung thick, almost tangible, like a heavy blanket pressing down. I was watching the clouds, waiting for that perfect lightning strike, when everything just felt wrong. Days earlier, I'd landed at a small airport under equally strange circumstances. The 2 men who greeted me had something unsettling about them. Their eyes seemed uniform, almost grey, with a strange flatness. One insisted what I'd seen wasn't metallic, but merely atmospheric interference. The terminal building stood dark and silent. No other voices, no other engines. When they handed me a clipboard, I signed quickly, just wanting to leave. They moved in perfect sync, taking the form and stepping back without a word. No handshake, no goodbye. When I walked into the hangar moments later, it was completely empty. No doors, no sign of the men. My ground crew appeared later, claiming no one had been around all day. I didn't argue. Later, I discovered my flight log was missing. The pen remained, but the notepad had vanished. Just like those men here one moment, gone the next. Now out here in this eerie field, that same strange feeling returned. Something was watching, waiting. The storm was coming. The storm had been brewing for hours, and I was ready with my camera, waiting for the perfect lightning strike. When the bolt finally cracked across the sky, I snapped the photo. As I lowered the camera to review the image, something unusual caught my eye. Between 2 electrical pylons, a dark, perfectly round shape flickered like a shadow, barely visible for a split second. I blinked hard, trying to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe it was a bird, a drone, or just a trick of light. But when I zoomed in on the photo, the shape was unmistakably there, a solid, disc-like object hovering near the power lines, illuminated by the lightning strike. My heart raced, though I tried to convince myself it was nothing more than a weather balloon or a camera glitch. Days later, I found myself in a quiet downtown cafe, editing photos on my laptop. The place was nearly empty, with just a few regulars scattered around. Suddenly, a man in a plain black suit approached my table and sat down without a word. His calm demeanor carried an unsettling intensity that immediately put me on edge. "You've been photographing the storm near the pylons," he said quietly. Before I could respond, he grabbed my laptop and pulled up the photo with the mysterious dark disk. To my surprise, he produced a small portable printer from his briefcase and printed a black and white version of the image. Sliding the print across the table, he fixed me with a piercing stare. "If you decide to share this image, consider framing it differently," he advised cryptically. Before I could ask what he meant, he stood up and walked away, disappearing as quickly as he had arrived. I looked down at the print. In black and matte and white, the disc-shaped silhouette was even more distinct, leaving me with more questions than answers. There was something weird happening that I couldn't quite explain. First, it started with subtle distortions around an object, like the air was bending or shimmering. Then my technology began acting strange. My phone would randomly drop calls. My GPS would malfunction, showing me in locations I'd never been. Soon I noticed people watching me. Men dressed in plain black clothes blended seamlessly into crowds. They never approached, but their presence felt undeniable. On another night chasing lightning photography, I went out hoping to capture something or understand what I'd witnessed before. The storm was intense, wind whipping around me. While setting up my camera, a lightning flash revealed what might have been the disk again, flickering near some pylons. But by the time I raised my camera, it vanished. I hurried home feeling uneasy. The next morning, a small envelope was slipped under my door. Inside was a Polaroid, taken from outside my apartment window. The photo was grainy, but my reflection was clear. Behind me, a faint, shadowy figure wearing a suit lurked. No explanation accompanied the photo. I tried dismissing it, but the sensation of being watched only intensified. I stopped sharing storm photographs and deleted every image from my devices. Yet questions lingered. Who was that man? What message was he trying to communicate? Weeks passed. The mysterious men in black never directly confronted me, but I sensed their eyes tracking me whenever I stepped outside. Strange technological glitches continued. I kept photographing storms, always hoping to capture the disk or understand its nature, but it never reappeared. Some mysteries, I realized, prefer remaining hidden. Some stories aren't meant to be told exactly as they happen. It was a quiet night in the ICU, specifically 3:10 a.m. on a Thursday, a time I remember precisely because our shift at Brook Hill Medical runs from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., and we always restock crash carts at 3. No new patients had arrived since midnight, and I was completing paperwork at the nurses' station in ICU 3. Suddenly, the hallway lights flickered. Only the row leading past room 314 to the fire exit was affected, a brief buzz before returning to normal. Initially, I didn't think much of it. The building was old, and the fifth-floor ICU occasionally experienced electrical surges from the HVAC system. The night shift was dragging on and the lights started flickering again, this time longer and more drawn out. A faint clicking sound, similar to the low hum beneath a transformer, caught my attention. I decided to check if a bulb was failing near the fire exit. Passing room 314, I noticed the double-door blinds were open. Mr. Garza, a long-term patient, lay intubated and sedated. Despite being unconscious, he was moving, with one hand raised toward the ceiling, eyes closed. The monitors showed nothing unusual as I watched his hand slowly fall back to the bed. Movement through the window behind him caught my eye. The small rooftop area beyond the unit, accessible only to maintenance, was typically dark at night, covered in gravel, vent hoods, and large HVAC metal boxes. It was a space I'd glimpsed during daytime when housekeeping propped open the linen room door. Something was up there. A flicker of movement appeared behind a vent stack, a tall, narrow shape standing unnaturally still. I wondered if it might be security, but we never had personnel up there without reason. Stepping closer to the window, I saw the shape clearly, backlit by city lights reflecting off the cloud cover. It stood perfectly upright. No face was visible, but the posture was odd. Head slightly tilted, arms hanging too, straight, like a mannequin trying to look human. Another hard flicker of the lights, and when they stabilized, the shape had vanished. I radioed the front desk, asking about roof personnel. They confirmed no one was up there. Security checked the access hatch and reported it remained locked from the inside. I didn't report the incident. Exhaustion could easily explain a strange shadow or hallucination, but something felt off. That section of the unit seemed colder, a sentiment other nurses later joked about, mentioning ghosts in the vents. I didn't find it funny. As my shift ended and I walked to the break room to clock out, a man suddenly appeared near the vending machines. I was walking past some machines near the elevator when I noticed him. A man in a pressed black suit, pale and neat, standing out of place. He didn't look like anyone official, no badge, no scrubs, no hospital ID. Just standing there facing the elevators, holding a slim black folder. Something about him made my stomach drop. As I walked past, he suddenly said my full name. Not a question, just a statement, like he already knew me. When he handed me the folder, I saw a single-page form printed on plain white paper. The form described an anomalous rooftop event between 2:45 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. on April 11th. It demanded I agree not to discuss any visual or auditory phenomena with hospital staff, patients, media, or law enforcement. A signature line waited, along with spaces for date and time. I asked what this was about. His response was chillingly mechanical. This is for the hospital's internal review. It will not go on your employment record. It is strongly advised that you cooperate. His voice was flat, words overly formal, like a bad translation. I noticed a strange symbol on his tie pin, a circle with a line through it. I refused to sign without a supervisor present. He just stood there, not blinking, holding the folder out. An elevator dinned. 2 people stepped out. The man turned and walked away without another word, heading toward the old records room before vanishing around a corner. Later that afternoon, I showed the form to my supervisor. She was puzzled, saying she knew nothing about any internal reviews or rooftop incidents. All hospital forms go through admin, she explained. She took the folder, promising to follow up. The next night, she told me the folder was empty when she opened it again. I haven't seen the mysterious man since, but sometimes when I take the supply elevator near the West Wing, I feel like someone's watching from behind the old access door to the roof, and those hallway lights. They still flicker, always at the same time. I've been a storm photographer for years, mostly freelance, selling shots to weather sites, magazines, or posting on social channels. It's not glamorous, cold nights on a folding chair, freezing fingers, but when you catch something rare, it's worth it. That day was different. Just an hour outside of Amarillo, Texas, the sky had been wild. Thunderheads stacking up, lightning ripping through clouds, the heavy smell of rain and ozone hanging in the air. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I was driving back with my camera gear packed tight in the truck bed, lenses cleaned and ready. While setting up near a dirt road off Highway 287, something caught my eye through the long telephoto lens. A particularly nasty cumulonimbus had weird ripples along its edges, like waves on water. Suddenly a small metallic shape darted through the clouds. Not a plane, not a bird, no trail, no noise, just a sleek, shiny object weaving effortlessly through the storm cells. I snapped photos, adjusting focus and shutter speed. The object vanished almost instantly. Checking the shots later, I saw it clearly on the negatives, a dark disc, like polished metal catching the last sunlight. That night, I set up my basement dark room, just a red bulb and some chemical trays. Working carefully, I began developing the film. As images emerged, the storm clouds, lightning, and rugged landscape took shape. And there it was again, that strange metallic blur twisting through the air, unlike anything I'd ever seen. The house was silent. Only the kitchen faucet dripped upstairs. Suddenly, the basement door creaked open. No footsteps on the stairs behind me. I spun around. A man in a black suit, no tie, stood in the red room light. Pale face, sharp features, calm but somehow menacing. I'm Rachel. By the way, he stood in the dark room, serious and out of place, his eyes catching the light in an odd way. I noticed a faint reflection of the negatives in his pupils. Can negatives lie? He said, his voice low and steady. I blinked, caught off guard. He stepped closer, hands folded calmly but deliberately. Can a negative show something that isn't really there, something that might never have been? I shook my head, unsure how to respond. His gaze swept the room, settling on the contact sheets pinned to the wall. You've captured something, he said. Something people aren't meant to see. My stomach tightened. Who was this man? A smile crossed his face, but it never reached his eyes. I'm someone who makes sure certain images don't spread, he explained, his tone polite yet carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. I felt trapped, knowing I couldn't let him take the film. Why are you here? What do you want? I asked. My voice barely a whisper. He pulled out a small card with black text on white, unreadable in the dim red light. We keep things quiet, he said. You won't be bothered if you destroy these. My heart raced. I wanted to refuse, to demand answers, but his calm certainty made me hesitate. Just then, my phone buzzed upstairs. A message from Mike about breakfast. The man noticed my distraction. Think it over, he said, then turned and walked out, the basement door closing softly behind him. In the days that followed, strange occurrences began. My camera gear would be slightly moved. Phone calls dropped with static. Soft footsteps outside windows at night revealed nothing when I looked. Who would believe me? A mysterious man telling me to erase evidence seemed crazy. One night, I examined the negatives again. The metallic object was gone, not faded or scratched, simply vanished. The silence was deafening, the implications overwhelming. I'm Tom Keller, a 37-year-old rail enthusiast who's been fascinated by trains, old tracks, and signals for as long as I can remember. My small town in upstate New York sits near abandoned industrial lines, where rust consumes the rails and weeds push through the ties. One early fall morning, I ventured out before dawn to explore a particular stretch of abandoned track, running through woods near an old quarry. I'd heard whispers about strange lights in the area, but mostly I just wanted some quiet time with my camera and the rails. The sky was still dark, with the eastern horizon softly lightening to a muted blue-gray before sunrise. Crisp air, damp with overnight dew, carried the scent of wet leaves and moss. Walking down the track, the only sound was the crunch of gravel beneath my boots. About 100 yards ahead, something caught my eye. Sitting directly on the tracks was a craft that didn't belong. Not a train car or truck, but something entirely different. It resembled a wingless airplane roughly the size of a large car. Its surface gleamed faintly, smoother than brushed metal, with no visible rivets or seams. A matte grey tone, almost blended with the misty rails, and it bore no markings or lights. I froze, unsure what to think. Though not easily rattled, something felt profoundly wrong. Slowly, I raised my camera and took a few pictures, attempting to get a better look through the fog. Later, I discovered the object was missing from my photographs. Checking the original digital files confirmed its absence, as if it had never been captured at all. I still have the developed photos and a card left by a mysterious man stored in a box under my bed alongside my camera. Sometimes, when storm clouds gather and the wind is right, I consider chasing storms again. But something about that night and the man's lingering question holds me back. Maybe negatives can lie, or perhaps some things are better left unseen. The tracks were eerily quiet that morning. A strange craft sat nearby, its shape sharp and angular, without wings or obvious doors. It seemed designed for sliding or hovering, not rolling. Not rolling. Just as I was about to step closer, a distant engine hum caught my attention. A black sedan pulled up at the tree line near the track entrance. The driver's side window rolled down and a tall man in his late 40s emerged. His charcoal suit looked expensive but understated, without a tie, dark hair slicked back. His face remained neutral, a practiced mask of emotional restraint. He approached me directly, skipping any introductions. "Tracks lead to places you don't belong," he stated flatly. When I asked what he meant, he glanced at the craft and then the ground. "It's best you don't touch anything here," he said, his tone low and serious. I explained I was just taking pictures, hoping to avoid trouble. He nodded slowly, then returned to his car. The sedan idled quietly before driving away, leaving me alone with the mysterious craft. Moments later, the mist thickened, and the vehicle simply vanished. Nothing remained but empty rails and morning dew. Over the next few days, I repeatedly checked the spot, but found no trace of the craft or the suited man. When I shared the story with friends, most laughed it off. Probably a military exercise, they'd say. But something didn't feel right. No helicopters, no patrol cars, no warning signs. Stranger occurrences began to follow. During walks near the tracks, I'd hear footsteps behind me, only to find no one there. Shadowy figures would slip between trees, always just out of clear view. My phone started acting up. Calls would drop when dialing certain numbers, and pictures taken near the tracks would mysteriously malfunction. These subtle, unsettling incidents left me both uneasy and intensely curious about what I'd witnessed that morning. I was driving home from work that night, late shift at a packaging plant just outside Greensburg, Indiana. The roads were empty, which wasn't unusual for that stretch of CR700E, long, quiet miles of corn and soy fields, punctuated only by the occasional mailbox at the end of a gravel drive. No street lights, just darkness. Around 12:40 a.m., maybe a bit later, I was sipping the last of my gas station coffee, not static, but dropping out completely, 2 or 3 seconds of silence, then popping back mid-sentence. I switched stations, but the same thing happened. Then my headlights dimmed, not going out completely, just dropping to about half brightness before returning to normal. That's when I slowed down and saw it. About a quarter mile ahead, off to the left side of the road, something hung in the air above a cut field. Not a plane, not moving, just suspended. An old, half-collapsed barn with a rusted roof stood nearby, one I'd passed countless times before, but this was different. Weeks later, strange things started happening. Driving home one evening, I noticed headlights behind me. At first, it seemed like another car on the road, but these lights stayed back, matching my speed for miles without passing. At a stoplight, a black sedan sat behind me. The driver never moved, just stared straight ahead. I changed my route and the car followed, trailing me until I pulled into my driveway, then vanishing. Phone calls began, silent, except for occasional slow, steady breathing, followed by a faint click. I stopped answering. The photos from that morning remain on my camera, blurry and strange. Something holds me back from returning to those tracks. As someone once said, maybe there are places you're not meant to go. Yet on quiet, foggy nights, I sometimes hear a faint hum, something sliding over metal tracks that no longer exist. It was hanging there in the sky, a massive black shape blocking out the stars. At first I couldn't make out its form, just a void high above me, maybe 50 feet up or even less, silent and still. As I drew nearer, the object's details emerged. A triangular shape, like a wide flat wedge with softly rounded edges. It stretched almost the entire width of the field, drifting with an almost imperceptible motion. Not a jerky movement, but a smooth, deliberate drift, like a blimp suspended in air. 3 small red lights dotted its underside, near each point, not blinking, just present, similar to standby lights on electronic devices. I pulled onto the shoulder and rolled down my window, expecting some sound. But there was nothing, complete silence. No crickets, no wind, not even my own engine noise. The air itself seemed frozen. I watched for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, completely aware of my isolation. I didn't reach for my phone. Wasn't scared, just intensely alert. Then, without warning, it began to rise. Straight up, perfectly level, no tilting or rotation, those red dots remained constant as the craft ascended higher and higher until it vanished against the night sky. No flash, no dramatic departure, just a gradual fade into darkness. I drove home to my quiet cul-de-sac subdivision near Westport. Went inside, microwaved some mac and cheese, showered, and went to bed around 2 a.m. Sleep was elusive, not from fear, but from an electric alertness that kept my mind racing. The next morning, around 7:30, I was up early. The garbage truck always wakes my dog. While feeding her and making coffee, I noticed a black sedan in the driveway. Government-looking, with tinted windows and no plates. 2 men in dark suits stood outside, one near the front step, another by the car, no visible badges. I cracked the door and asked what they needed. The man closest to the house gave a small, controlled smile. I was driving home from a work trip in Vegas, taking the scenic route through Red Rock Canyon. It was a Tuesday evening just after sunset, that time when the sky still holds a faint glow, but shadows stretch long and dark, and the temperature drops quickly. I'd never been a fan of freeways, preferring these winding canyon roads. A few weeks ago, something strange happened. 2 men showed up at my house, quiet and professional. The first asked just a few quick questions. He wanted to know if I'd been on County Road 700E the night before, near the collapsed barn. I said yes, on my way home from work. Did you see anything unusual while driving? He asked. I hesitated, unsure how to respond. He studied me carefully, not threateningly, but like he was analyzing my reaction. Finally, I mentioned seeing some weird lights in the sky. The second man, standing by their car, called over, "Do you often imagine things at night?" His tone wasn't sarcastic. It sounded like a genuine inquiry, as if he'd asked similar questions before and received serious responses. The first man kept his eyes on me. I firmly stated I was awake and driving, and I knew exactly what I'd seen. They asked about outdoor cameras. I had none. They nodded, thanked me, and left, driving directly out of the neighborhood without stopping anywhere else. Later that day, I noticed something odd. My mailbox, one of those group boxes for the block, had a strange smear across its front, like oil or ash. No other mailboxes were marked. I wiped it off with a paper towel, which left a grey, greasy streak. I considered keeping the towel, but ultimately threw it away. That night, my dog behaved strangely. She refused to go into the backyard, whining at the door and backing away when I opened it. I walked her out front instead. She kept looking up, not barking, just watching the sky intently. Since then, I've changed my routine. Every night when I drive home from work, I take a different route. The narrow road twisted through the canyon, hemmed in by steep sandstone cliffs. At this hour, around 7:30, the route was deserted except for me. Just past a sharp bend, an old black sedan without plates caught my eye. Something felt odd about the car sitting there in the middle of nowhere. I slowed down, half expecting a roadblock or some construction work. But there were no signs, no cones, nothing official. Suddenly, 2 men emerged. They were dressed identically in black suits and dark sunglasses, despite the low evening light. One tall and in his early 40s, the other shorter and around late 30s. They approached my vehicle with purpose. The tall man spoke first, his tone direct. "Road ahead is closed for maintenance. You'll have to turn back." I looked up the road, puzzled. No workers, no barriers, no equipment were visible. When I questioned the maintenance, the shorter man cut in. "Private job." I tried to argue. "I've got to get through. I'm trying to get home." The tall guy was unmoved. "We can't let you through. It's not safe." The empty canyon surrounded us. Quiet rocks and a fading sky. Their car was completely black, with no visible windows or markings. "How long is this maintenance?" I asked. "Indefinite," came the terse reply. Something about the entire situation felt deeply unsettling. Reluctantly, I started backing up, continuously checking my rearview mirror. When I glanced back, both men were already in their car. As I shifted gears, I looked over my shoulder. Inexplicably, the sedan had vanished. No engine sound, no lights, nothing. Just the empty road and canyon walls. No tire marks, no evidence they'd ever been there. Confused, I stopped and gripped the steering wheel. Thinking they might have moved ahead to block the road, I crept forward carefully. Still nothing unusual. I pulled over at a wider spot and stepped out, scanning the surroundings. The canyon was silent, interrupted only by dry brush rustling in the wind. I checked my phone. No signal. Walking a bit up the road, I continued searching for any sign of the mysterious men or their car. But there was nothing. 2 summers ago, during the Picades, I drove out to a desolate stretch of County Road 221, about 30 miles east of Lander, Wyoming. The landscape was sparse, just scrub hills and a lone broken windmill. I knew this area well from past field work. It was a quiet spot with zero light pollution. Perfect for my plan, parking the truck off the shoulder, spreading a blanket in the truck bed, and setting up to watch the meteor shower with a thermos of coffee and a camera. The sky was crystal clear, No clouds, no moon. As the night progressed, something felt off. I scanned the empty road, searching for tracks or any explanation for the strange events that would unfold. Finding nothing, I retreated to my car, took a deep breath, and started driving back. The sky had transformed into a deep blue, with the first stars emerging. About 10 minutes into the drive, a peculiar light caught my attention. Hovering just above the canyon rim, it was a faint, steady glow unlike any aircraft. It seemed almost like a lantern suspended in the sky. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but the light remained, persistently following me at the edge of my vision. I stopped at the small diner near the canyon entrance. The place was deserted except for Sam, the night cook. When I shared my experience expecting ridicule, Sam's response was unexpected. He nodded slowly, revealing that strange sightings weren't uncommon in the area: unexplained lights, mysterious figures, roads that seemingly vanish without a trace. Leaving with an uneasy feeling, I drove home, constantly checking my mirrors for the black sedan or the two men. But the road was empty. Later, I scoured news sites and county road updates, finding nothing about road closures or maintenance. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the encounter from my mind. I shared the story with friends who made jokes about government agents or aliens. A couple of days later, I discovered a blank scrap of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. I folded it and left it on the dashboard, untouched. That night, I went to bed, my mind swirling with thoughts of the mysterious men, the deserted road, and the strange, lingering light. The night sky was my only companion, sprawling with stars. I had arrived early, well before peak meteor activity, but that didn't bother me. Solitude and the absence of cell service made the experience even more appealing. Hours passed quietly. Around 12:30, I dozed off, and when I awoke just after 2 a.m., the sky was illuminated. I set up my camera on a basic tripod in the truck bed, capturing long exposures of the celestial display. Sometime after 3 a.m., something caught my eye on the road behind me. Initially, I thought it was the tripod's shadow, but it remained stationary when I moved. A shape, possibly a person, stood perfectly centered on the road, about 50 feet back. Number movement, no. Flashlight, just a dark silhouette. I watched, wondering if someone had pulled over, but there was no sound of a car or footsteps. This figure was unnervingly still, unlike any normal person. When I turned on my headlamp and directed the beam toward them, it illuminated the road and surrounding brush, but didn't reveal their face. They didn't react, no flinching, no stepping back. Quickly, I snapped a photo with my phone. The moment the shutter clicked, the figure turned and walked into the darkness, vanishing behind the road's low slope without a sound. I considered approaching to offer help, called out, but received no response. Unwilling to chase an unknown presence through the wilderness, I returned to my truck. Reviewing the image, I saw a thin, abnormally tall figure, possibly wearing black. The arms seemed disproportionately long and the head was bizarrely shaped, almost featureless, as if the face was turned away or blurred. I rationalized it as a light trick or camera glitch, though it unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. The rest of the night passed uneventfully. I continued watching the meteor shower and left just before dawn. The next morning, stopping for gas at a Conoco in Riverton around 7 a.m., the encounter began to feel truly strange. I went inside to use the bathroom, a routine stop that would soon take an unexpected turn. A couple weeks back, on a crisp early autumn evening, the sky crystal clear and the air sharp, I was driving. The night was settling in just after sunset when everything started. I stopped at a gas station, empty except for a single cashier behind the counter. While drying my hands in the bathroom, the door opened. A man entered, clean-cut, mid-40s, pale skin, wearing a black suit with the top button fastened and no tie. His shoes were immaculate. He didn't seem like he belonged there. Standing by the sinks, he spoke. Without looking at me, "You've seen too much light lately." I laughed, thinking it was some weird joke. Then he turned, facing me directly. My stomach dropped. His eyes were wrong. The color seemed off, irises too pale, pupils too large. "Not fake, just not right," he said, holding out his hand. "Your phone? You took a picture. Give me the device." His voice held no threat, just a flat certainty. Strangely, I complied. I handed over my phone. He unlocked it. I never told him the code, then walked out. I followed him into the store, but he had vanished completely. No footsteps, no sound. The cashier continued flipping through a flyer, never looking up. When I asked if he'd seen anyone leave, he said no one had come in. I checked the parking lot. No black car, no SUV, nothing, just me and my truck. Standing there for 5 minutes, I tried to make sense of what happened. Then I realized my phone was back in my pocket. I hadn't felt him return it, didn't see him come near me. When I unlocked the device, everything was wiped. Camera roll, texts, downloads, all gone. Factory reset. Only my cloud-synced contacts remained. The photo I'd taken had disappeared, not even in the backup folder. That night, I plugged the phone into my laptop and ran recovery software. Nothing. The metadata showed a hard reset at 7:14 a.m., exactly when I was in that gas station bathroom. I've rarely discussed this with anyone. Those I told assumed I'd dreamed it. But I know what happened. That stretch of road, I've never gone back. Here's the rewritten text. The lake behind my place had this familiar stillness that night. I was out on the dock, phone in hand, attempting to capture some star shots. Everything felt normal until something caught my eye. Hovering just above the water's surface, a dark silhouette hung motionless in the lake's center. This wasn't like any aircraft or bird I'd seen before. No blinking lights, no sound, just a solid, sharp shape against the night sky. I zoomed in with my phone camera, studying its details. The object was smooth and oval, a matte black that seemed to absorb the surrounding darkness. For several minutes it remained perfectly still. Then, without warning, it began drifting sideways incrementally. Suddenly, it shot straight upward and vanished into the darkness. Unnerved but intrigued, I continued watching the now empty lake. Days later, a mysterious black car appeared at the end of my driveway. An older model from the early 2000s, it was immaculate. No dents, no license plate. What struck me as odd was the untouched gravel around it. No tire tracks, no footprints. I checked the windows, empty, no keys, nothing. Each morning, the car remained in exactly the same spot. I started leaving notes on the windshield, hoping the owner would move it. But the notes stayed put, and the car didn't budge. Something felt off. Then one evening, while sitting on my porch after dinner, I heard gravel crunching. Looking up, I saw a man in a neat black suit standing near my driveway's end. His face was shadowed by the streetlight, and he just stood there, watching me in complete silence. The strange occurrences were mounting, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was happening. I was walking Benny, my shepherd mix, late one February night about 2 winters ago. Our neighborhood in Spokane Valley near Pines and 16th was quiet, just ranch-style houses and older trees, with hardly any traffic after dark. Around 12:45 a.m., which is our usual pre-bed walk time, we were heading back up the street. Benny suddenly stopped and stared straight up. At first, I thought he might be watching a bird or an owl. But when I looked, I saw something else entirely, a massive triangle, blacker than the night sky. Not a plane, I know jets well enough to recognize their shape. This was different. Only 3 faint points of light marked its edges. Days later, strange things started happening. A car would appear every morning, though no one ever seemed to be driving it. My phone would glitch when I tried taking pictures of the lake, showing weird static. Late at night, I'd hear a soft humming from the water that vanished the moment I went outside to investigate. One evening, a man approached me on the porch. He stood quietly before saying something that would haunt me. The water remembers. When I asked him to repeat it, he simply walked away into the darkness, disappearing completely. The incident escalated one night. Around 3 a.m. soft blue lights flickered over the lake, pulsing slowly. I tried capturing them with my phone, but the screen went black, the camera frozen. When I looked again, the lights were gone. The man never returned. The car stopped showing up. But something remained, a feeling of being watched whenever I'm near the water. Something just below the surface. His cryptic words echo constantly. The water remembers. I ran inside and locked the door that first night, watching out the window. But nothing more happened then. The object drifted overhead, maybe 200 feet up, its white corners barely visible. Its movement was unnaturally slow, defying the physics of something its size. No engine sound, no wind disturbance, just gliding as if weightless. An eerie silence enveloped everything. The world's volume seemed to drop, muting all sounds around me. My footsteps vanished. Even the dog's breathing disappeared. Benny sat motionless, staring until the object slipped behind the northern tree line. When I tried to capture a photo, my phone's screen froze, locked in place. It only resumed working after the object had gone. I didn't mention the incident to anyone. It seemed like another unexplained moment, perhaps a military test, an unknown drone, something to be filed away and forgotten. But 2 days later, strange events began to unfold. On a Tuesday night, I awoke suddenly, wide-eyed without explanation. Walking to check the thermostat, I noticed a black sedan across the street. An older model with chrome trim. It sat idling in front of the Wilkins house. At precisely 3:17 a.m., its headlights performed a slow, deliberate fade, a single subtle signal before smoothly turning and disappearing around the block's corner. I dismissed it as a random occurrence. Yet the next night, and the nights following, the same scenario repeated. Always 3:17 a.m., always one headlight flash. The car never parked in exactly the same spot, sometimes near the Wilkins, sometimes closer to the Morgans, but always directly across from my house. By the fifth night, unease crept in. I set up my phone on a tripod, recording from 3:10 for 20 minutes, hoping to capture evidence. But something was different this time. I'd been watching the car for nights now. It always appeared at the same time, 3:17. Just one quick flash, and then gone before I could reach the door. No one believed me, not the Morgans with their open blinds, not old Mr. Harrington who claims his dog barks at the slightest movement, and definitely not my wife who works nights at the hospital. When I first told her about the car, she brushed it off. "Stop watching those weird documentaries before bed," she said. So I did. I changed my routine. Started walking Benny earlier, right after dinner, but I couldn't stop checking the window. Night after night, the car returned. Same pattern. I even called the non-emergency line, gave them all the details I could, time, make, model. They promised to send a cruiser. Did they? I never knew. About a week in, I decided to wait outside. Lights off, hidden behind the porch column. Benny was inside, restless. At 3:17 it happened again. No headlights this time, just dim running lights. Parked directly across the street, engine running. The windows were impossibly dark. The car unnaturally clean. Then the driver's side window rolled down halfway. A pale, thin man in a black suit sat perfectly still, staring right at me. We locked eyes. No movement. After maybe 10 seconds, he raised his hand, not a wave, but a stop signal. Then rolled the window up and drove away. The next few nights, nothing. Empty street. I told myself I was relieved, but part of me missed the certainty of its appearance. Now I just check out of habit. Sometimes I think I hear an engine idling nearby, but when I look, nothing. The forest in northern Minnesota hummed with a late September stillness. Dry leaves rustled softly as I walked the perimeter, taking notes on the sparse woodland activity since dawn. Something felt different that morning. The crisp air hinted at fall's approaching arrival, but hadn't fully committed. As I was about to head back to the research station, an unusual sight caught my eye in the clearing. A series of perfectly round scorch marks dotted the ground, 6 or 7 circular impressions, each about 2 feet across, arranged in a rough 1.5-foot diameter circle. The marks were deeply embedded, the soil beneath blackened and cracked. Strangely, the surrounding vegetation remained untouched. No burned leaves, no snapped branches. These marks were unlike anything I'd encountered before. I circled slowly, searching for any explanation. No footprints, no tire tracks, no signs of human activity or campfires. Just those precise, symmetrical burns, like a giant cookie cutter had been pressed into the earth. I documented everything meticulously. Photos, sketches, soil samples. I marked the location on my GPS and radioed the research station. My colleagues suggested possible explanations, a lightning strike, perhaps, or animal territorial marking, but nothing explained the mark's perfect geometry. An unsettling quiet settled over the forest. I felt watched, constantly glancing over my shoulder, seeing nothing. Days later, an unexpected visitor arrived. A knock at the station's door, an old wooden cabin with minimal amenities, I opened it cautiously to find a tall man in an out-of-place black suit. No identification, no badge. Dark, steady eyes. His voice flat and direct. I'm interested in patterns in non-human behavior, just like that. Late October, with its early sunset and crisp air, found me hiking alone in the Cascades between Snoqualmie and Stevens Pass. I'm Claire, a graphic designer from Seattle, who sometimes needs to escape the city's constant noise. That day, I'd started hiking around noon, hoping to cover 5 or 6 miles before turning back. The trail was mostly empty, with just an occasional runner or dog walker passing by. The forest felt damp from recent rains, that thick moisture hanging in the air. I was trying to get away from everything: work, people, the constant urban buzz that sometimes overwhelms me. As I walked, I noticed something strange: scorch marks in a small clearing. I took photos, feeling uneasy. Later, a man appeared at my cabin. He didn't explain why he was there, but asked incredibly detailed questions about my work tracking animals and collecting data. His demeanor was unsettling. The way he moved, how his gaze never wavered, analyzing every word and reaction. He seemed to know exactly where the clearing was without asking for directions. When I offered to show him the location, he politely declined, saying he had his own methods. He stayed almost an hour, then left without another word. I watched him walk away through the trees, his steps eerily silent on the soft forest floor. After he left, I double-checked everything: my equipment, my locks. Nothing was missing, but something felt wrong. In the days that followed, those scorch marks kept replaying in my mind. The man's unnatural calm, his seemingly impossible knowledge, it all haunted me. I returned to the clearing multiple times, looking for changes or new marks, but found nothing unusual. Yet on some nights, when the wind rustles the trees just right, I swear I hear a low, strange hum, not like any animal or machine, just a faint vibration beneath the forest's skin. I never saw the man again. No calls, no messages, just that single bizarre visit, and the lingering feeling that something out there was watching, though not particularly interested in me. I was hiking a familiar trail, expecting nothing out of the ordinary. About 3 miles in, something caught my eye near a clump of ferns. A black briefcase sat upright on the dirt, carefully placed. It was plain, with a matte black surface scratched up from what seemed like dragging or bumping. Curiosity drew me closer, but the trail was completely empty. The briefcase was locked tight, no visible combination or keyhole. It resembled a hard-shell case for camera gear or instruments, but definitively sealed. I tried jiggling and shaking the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Thinking someone might return for it, I left it where it was and continued walking. At first, the hike seemed normal. Then things started feeling strange. The forest felt heavier, the air thicker, bird chirps and leaf rustlings became muted, like someone had turned down the world's volume. I wondered if my mind was playing tricks on me. When I reached the turnaround point and looked back, the briefcase had vanished. I was certain it had been there moments before. No footprints, no crushed ferns, nothing, just gone. The following days were unsettling. I constantly felt watched, but never saw anyone. My phone battery drained unusually fast. Calls became static-filled, and the screen would randomly flicker. Small disturbances, but enough to make me uneasy. A few days later, I returned to the trailhead to clear my head. As I walked the path, I noticed a man near the parking lot's edge. He wore a crisp black suit and tie, with short, neatly combed dark hair. His eyes were what truly unnerved me, not just tired, but completely hollow, like empty sockets with nothing behind them. I was out at Devil's Ridge, a secluded hiking spot near Flagstaff, Arizona, that I discovered a couple of years back. My goal was simple: photograph the stars. Late September brought a dry, crisp atmosphere that turned surprisingly cold once the sun disappeared. I'd packed my camera gear, a tripod, some lenses, and my phone, and set everything up about an hour after sunset, perfectly timed to capture the Milky Way. The landscape was utterly silent, broken only by occasional wind whistling through scrub and pine needles. As I worked on adjusting aperture and exposure, the sky transformed into a breathtaking canvas of darkness studded with stars. That's when something caught my eye on the ridge across the small valley. A figure stood motionless on a narrow rock outcrop, silhouetted against the starry backdrop. Dressed entirely in black, it was like a statue: no movement, no discernible features. At first, I assumed it was another late-night hiker or photographer, but something felt off. No footsteps, no voices had preceded its appearance in this remote location. I called out softly, "Hey, you okay over there?" Silence. Second attempt, slightly louder, yielded the same result. The figure remained completely still, watching me. When I looked back, it hadn't moved or say anything, just observed me as I started down the trail. Our encounter left me with an unsettling feeling. I stopped and looked back, briefly thinking he might speak, but he simply turned and walked away, his footsteps barely audible on the gravel. Something about the briefcase and this man seemed deeply connected, though I couldn't explain why. Subsequent hikes to that spot revealed no trace of the briefcase or any disturbance. I never saw the man again in person, but something lingers. Occasionally, when I'm alone, I catch a glimpse of a figure at the edge of my vision, always in a black suit, with those same blank, empty eyes. Questions haunt me. What was in that briefcase? Why was it there? Why did it vanish? I have no answers, just a persistent sensation that something was watching, waiting, or attempting to communicate in a way beyond my comprehension. Something vanished right in front of my eyes. Not hidden or walking away, but just gone, like someone flipped a switch. I blinked and looked again, but nothing was there. The moment left me uneasy, yet strangely curious. Alone in the wilderness, far from anything familiar, I wondered if my eyes were playing tricks. Maybe it was the darkness, the strange way light hit the ridge, or just my imagination running wild. I tried to refocus on my camera and the stars, but my hands trembled slightly. Minutes later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Just a random string of digits. Something compelled me to answer. The voice was distorted, low and chillingly cold. 2 words, "We're watching," then silence. I stared at the phone, my heart racing. The cold air seemed to grow even colder. Should I leave or stay and investigate? I tried convincing myself it was a prank or technical glitch, but that voice didn't sound like a joke. Driving home through winding desert roads, the night felt alive with shifting shadows. The radio crackled with static. More than once, I caught glimpses of phantom headlights in my rearview mirror, disappearing when I looked directly. At home, I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. Everything seemed normal. The next day, I returned to the ridge with friends. We searched for footprints or signs of disturbance, but found nothing. The rocks and dirt were completely undisturbed. That night, from my bedroom window, I saw a shadow slip between trees across the street. I thought it might be a neighbor or stray animal, but when I looked again, nothing was there. I've returned to Devil's Ridge many times since, never seeing that figure again, but sometimes I feel watched. A quiet pressure, like invisible eyes just beyond my perception. Occasionally, my phone lights up with unrecognized numbers. When I answer, only silence greets me. I don't understand what happened or who that figure was. All I know is that something strange lurks in the darkness out there. In the vast darkness, a silent watcher lurked. Overhead, the night sky stretched endlessly, and within its depths, an unseen presence observed with intense focus. Something was alert, aware, and completely fixed on what lay below. The darkness seemed alive with an unspoken awareness, a watchful consciousness that breathed with quiet intensity. Something was tracking, monitoring, waiting, its gaze unblinking and deliberate.